All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Instructor Phil Demetriadis. Today we're going to be doing a review of assignment number 3 of our tonal studies. Okay, we had 3 particular studies that we're looking at. Just a reminder, they also had perspective views, and they were looking for a certain type of perspective. Okay, so just as a brief descriptor, let's go back, take a look at Dart 136. Oop, I can't type today. Dart 136.blogspot. All right. So if you remember up here, up on the class site here, we had a couple of demos up, and we talked about the perspective point of views that we wanted to have. Okay. We had a castle, we had the pathway surrounded, and then we had the 3-point. Okay. So I want to make sure we're on that same section. We're all working together. Okay. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at Tito. You're the first victim on The Price is Right. Right? Okay, or on The Drawing is Wrong. No, I'm just kidding. So let's take a look at what you have here. Okay. Hold on a minute. Someone is messing with Photoshop because let me see if I have my brushes. Cool, got my brushes. And let me go in here. Let me adjust. Let's get rid of these stupid rulers. Extras. We don't need the extras. Actually.
Control R.
Yeah. Sometimes it's on. I was worried if my hotkeys override that. Okay, Tito, overall, pretty good piece. I like the light that's coming in there. I do have one question. And also, class, please feel free to chime in. If there's something you see or notice that I did not cover, or something that you notice right away, please mention it. Okay, so in terms of light sources, I'm looking at this piece, right? I have the sensibility of 2 lights happening. Okay, I have light that looks like it's coming from the direction to the side here. Okay. Sorry, let me go back. I had the wrong brush. And there we go. So light is coming in at that direction, correct?
More like just straight on the side.
Or just coming this way at a side angle. Is that correct?
I guess so, yeah.
I guess so.
It's basically just coming from the left. I just said left.
Okay, so it's coming from the left in general. So one of the things that I notice is I feel like a part of your drawing can get a little bit hot in terms of where you want us to look at in terms of contrast. Okay, so right now, you know, if I shrink this down, I'm looking at it in terms of contrast. It's a nice drawn piece, but we have a contrast area over here and we have something up here. Okay, so in this particular piece, being such a large, almost a vertical pan, which could totally work because, let me see if I can do this really quick. If you imagine inside the animation industry, if this was a pan and we were starting here and then we were trucking up inside our pan move, that would make sense as part of the story. So in this situation, we could technically have sort of 2 focal points, okay? Because in pan moves, that's easily, you know, more easily said than done. So what I would do right here is I noticed when I'm looking at this gray right here, you could punch it up a little bit. If I hold on, if I switch colors here, if I go over and bring up the color picker and look at that, that's really pretty. Look at it, it's like at a 60 or 70 right there. So the values are really nicely done, but you could go over this on top of this with a real simple white highlight pass and really get this area to pop. And then what I would do for your portfolio after that is I would indicate maybe a frame, you know, those HD frame formats I showed you guys from Cartoon Color. I would put one of those on there and I would indicate that this either being a start position and then this being and then this being a, grab the wrong image there, this being the finished position as we move back up here. Okay, because that would really work. You could take the audience on this view moving from here going up into this upper, you know, an upper pan shot. Okay, so as far as the values go, look, if I come over here and I just even go at like a 20 or 30, and if I come back here and let's get back to brush, if I just take, where's one of my brushes? So it's funny, we've been doing a lot of paint overs lately in a couple of my classes. So in interior sketching, now here we are. This area could just be brightened so much more. There's you can get some nice highlights coming through here, coming out. You know, this can also fade off a little bit here. It doesn't have to be so perfect, right? You can have some really cool sort of highlights going on parts of these little, on parts of the edge right here. That might even be a little bit too bright. I can erase those in a minute. I did those with a 60. All right. So my goal is to make this a little bit more of the focal point here by creating and establishing just a little bit more contrast inside the piece. So just by these simple little adjustments, coming in here, maybe you have light sort of hitting along also part of that edge, hitting down there. Do you see what's happened a little bit more? Look, even this wall feels sort of the same. Okay, so look, I can even come in here and just lightly sort of touch up some of this and then sort of go down to like 5% and sort of spread it across really easily. Same thing in here. For that, what I'm going to do is I'd go to like a fuzzy brush and then just have the light sort of just passing in general. Let me make the whole image smaller. I might come here and just sort of lightly go across like this to really indicate the light sort of coming in from that angled side. Even here, it's going to hit some of this. So you have an area, like I did the little highlights down here. Do you see those popping now? Right? If I come back over here and also work my way up. So if light's coming in through here, look right here, I barely have any highlights in there. So I can get in here, I can have some nice little highlights hitting along that top surface. I can have a highlight right in here, right down about there. So you need to think not just about the highlights hitting and pushing that up a little bit, but also now we might also have a little bit more of a core shadow on some of this, right? Coming down in here, I could punch up. You have a really nice, soft sense of value in here in your piece. So my hat's off to you. You've done a really great job. You brought it up to a 90% level. And no line. Also awesome. What does that mean, Tito? It means you're getting better, and I'm noticing it. Okay? So now a couple little adjustments here. But see, I just want to give that feeling that light is hitting parts of these surfaces. You know, light spreads across, right? So it might be hitting here, being a little bit brighter, and then it gets over here, starts to fade, and then it diminishes off back there. It's a little bit more reflective. We can have a little bit of light, very lightly sort of coming across part of the top here, and then spreading across part of this. Anything, even right here, you have this little edge right in here. That might be a little bit of bounce light on there, just sort of gradating across. A little bit more coming in here. A little bit more coming across. Like so. Okay, so, and as I work my way up, excuse me, I can't talk. As I work my way up, what about here? That's going to be a stone or a brick, right? There's no reason why light wouldn't be hitting the side of some of these bricks and these stones, sort of wrapping over part of here. So then you might want to think about, you know, you just have a wood door there. Usually wood doors have some type of iron across the top of it. So if you have iron across it holding it together with like rivets, there could be a couple little highlights on there. So if I come in here and let me just keep playing with this a little bit, punch a couple up in there. And then the big thing I notice is when we get up here, okay, now look, remember, you have your highlight right on the edge, right? Sometimes your highlight is sort of like on a sphere, it's sort of in the middle a little bit. Okay, it's not always on the edge, and then you can have that little bit of reflective light. So if I make my brush really smaller back here, I can have a little bit of reflective light bouncing back off the other side. Okay, the thing I noticed though that you have happening on a couple of your illustrations in here is on all three, when I looked at them earlier after you sent them, you're lacking a little bit of, hold on a minute, okay, you're lacking any sky information in there. Okay, it feels like they're in a dome. It's this gradient dome. So if you come over, take a really sort of simple brush, take a cloud brush, watch, I'm even going to cheat. I'm going to do this on another layer. I'm going to come in here and just be like, if you might put a couple clouds in here. I was going to blur them really quick, but sometimes you can just throw a couple in real quick. This brush has a rotation jitter on it, which is sort of cool because you can make things. And if you put a cloud in like that and it's too thick, what I love is I can just squash it like this. And then I can say select all, copy, paste, and I can put another version, transform. I could flip it to the opposite side. I could even make these a little bit smaller, like so, and I could get those to sort of fit in there. If I want, I can come back and I can erase Wrong eraser. I can erase some of this so it falls behind there. And then if that cloud's too bright, since it's on another layer, I can just drop down some of the opacity and get it to blend in. So just what I did super quick with clouds, right? Which was really nothing fancy. I just threw it in there. Oops. Super quick, all right? I'm already looking at your piece. And if I merge these layers together that I have in here, see what it's doing? Adding a little bit more white to it. It's just getting a little bit more focal point here. And remember, I mean, you're giving us this really wonderful pan shot. We have this opportunity to go from here and to pan upwards. So we want to see that those highlights reflecting light side, dark side, as we go all the way up here to the very top. But when we get up here to the top, that feels like I'm in a bubble with that back surface, right?
Yeah.
So you got to get in there and just put some clouds, steps, a little bit more depth, have that light coming in there, and then that's a beautiful tonal study right there. It's really nicely done. And there's a couple things that's really great about it. Number one, you have sort of your own little style coming out of there. Number two, he's lost the line, folks. Do you guys see that? The line's gone. So one of my comments I give to you guys, especially students, as intermediate painters, you're stuck in this land of, do I paint under my line? Do I start to paint over my line? Or do I just ditch my line completely? And by turning off your line, it really gives you a better idea how your values and your shapes are holding together. Here, your line's gone. And that's great. It's really nicely done. Okay, so all we've done here is just put a couple highlights and you're finished. Okay, let's go to your second version here. Now, same thing. I feel like I'm in that dome again.
Yeah.
I have this dome above. We need some atmosphere to transpire in the back. And also, you got to be very careful. Pull up the color picker. If I look at part of this dome color right in here, that's the sky, and you're already down here at like a 60 or 70. And part of that color, so your wall is even a little bit brighter. Okay? Well, it's okay, it's getting hit by the light, but we can make this feel sort of airy right in here. And literally all I have to do is do what I did before with the clouds. So let's do that just really quick. First off, let's go back to a brush, and I'm just going to take a fuzzy brush here, and I'm going to come across at like a 10% grade and try to, let me put a little marquee over this little selection there. Okay, I'm going to hide that. So I'm going to take the brush now. I'm going to lightly, what am I at, 10%? Sort of come over here, and then I'm going to sort of do this natural gradient and try to get this white. And I notice I'm still in a gray. I need to go up here to about there. Okay. I want to just create it, make it a little bit more foggy, sort of in the back. Okay. Just to dull down that color just a teeny bit. Okay. Now that that's done, now I can come back over and I can take my brush, then let's throw a couple clouds in there. I give you guys most of my brushes. Some of these I just find at different places and you can do different things with. This cloud already comes sort of established like this. Oops. It's like a dedicated cloud, but what I like about that is that I could run it through a blur option if I want. So if I come down to blur, and if I blur that cloud up a little, actually I did bring up the let me do that again. Okay. Filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. And now I can control, if I bring this over to the side, I have that little cloud there. See that blur? How it completely faded it out. So I can get I can get something sort of in the middle and get a set of clouds to sort of fade in there. Let me get it right in the middle. I keep jumping between 10 and 20. So let's say that's pretty good. And something I like to do to save myself time is I love using transform options, because it's just really convenient where I can take, hold on. I thought I had that separate. There we go. So now I could transform that cloud out. See, and I could put it right over there, and then, hold on a minute. Select all and copy. Now I have it in the computer's memory, so I can just paste it down. I'm going to come back to erase. I'm going to erase part of the overlap. So I want the cloud to feel like it's sitting behind that building and that structure. Now that it's in the memory, boom, I can just paste it, and then I could bring part of that cloud over. I can put some of it, let's say, about right in here. And the same thing, I could drop down the opacity a little bit. I can get that to fade in. Now I don't have your layer option, so I'm painting on top of some of your there's stuff here. If I have the layered file, it's a lot easier for you guys just to grab it, drag it underneath part of your layer. So I'm going to fade part of that cloud in there. I want this to be sort of behind this structure as well. So let me just shrink down, sort of get it to fit in there, like so. Okay, and what I'm going to do, let me merge those layers together. So I want it to go lighter and then diminish back. So I can go back to my eraser. I can put my eraser at like 10%, enlarge it, and then I can just sort of go across and flatten some of this down. So I'm going to push that back down by erasing a little bit so it fades off in the back. Okay, so just right now, just going in there and putting a little bit more clouds does so much more for the atmosphere and brightens it just a teeny bit more. Okay, I also noticed this haze right here, it's a little bright to me when I'm turning it off and on. So I might come back here. I like that being the shadow side, so I'm going to erase some of this very lightly with my eraser, like a 10%, sort of fade that down. And to me, there's a little bit more with the sky. Skies are so important because skies really communicate a lot about atmosphere. I mean, that's why we like sunsets so much. Because we have clouds, we have a sky plane, just like a ground plane, and we get to see clouds overlapping each other, birds, scale, all these little elements that come together. In fact, something that I mentioned before to quite a few students is a little trick that a lot of people do. Is one way of showing scale inside a piece is coming in and having something floating or flying in the background. And there's a couple different things you can do. I don't think I have the brushes here. I used to have some little birds that I have at home. This is a different brush pack here. Even leaves can be really cool sometimes because you get these little leaves and you can make it look like, sort of like the wind sort of blowing. You can grab something like this and you can just put like, oops, went really large there. Let's see what happens here. Is that my phone or someone else's? It's a good ringtone. So look, what's cool is I can put a couple leaves in a piece. Let me try to get a little bit richer. Why I can't see him now. Those are a little dark. Sometimes you just throw them around in a couple different places and it just gives that feeling that like the wind is sort of blowing and moving around. You can have them by the tree. Sometimes you can put them up there. They look like birds, or like there's a little bit of dust. If I had my bird brush, I could do that really easily, but I didn't see it in here. Let me check one more time. That is a really cool brush that I got, and then what I did is I modified it and added in, I don't have it with me, and I added in other birds, so that way I can use that for scale to put around a castle. But even if I made these, a lot lighter and a little bit smaller, like this, they almost look like birds sort of flying in the air. A little bit, you see that? Mm-hmm. It's a great little trick some guys do, and it's just to set and establish a little bit of scale inside a piece, or make it look like it's a little windy. There's also a dust brush, and if you have a dust brush, you can use one of those too around parts of the castle to make it. Let me see if I have that one. I'm pretty sure I have that right here.
It says dust at the bottom.
Yeah, right here. So dust see, it's this little sort of particle thing. It could also be used for rain a little bit, depending on how bright you want to make it. But if you make something really small, like see, it puts these little dots sort of over parts of the piece, and it just makes it feel a little bit more not so rendered and so tight, And you can go really small with them. And again, I did it on a separate layer, so if I go too dark, I can go to erase, and I can either dull it down or I can go down to opacity and drop it down just a little bit more. Okay, that's be my only comment on that one. It looks pretty good the way it is. I just want to lighten the sky and put a little bit more sense of light coming in. If light's hitting this facade, we got to go back and think from a drawing point of view that if light is coming over and if it's hitting in this direction, you're going to have clouds that are also going to be hit with highlights on them accordingly, matching the other part of the environment, right? So that's what I would sort of throw in there. Okay, all right, let's take a look at this guy here. Same sort of principle. I don't know if it's just my computer that it's a little bit darker on, but
I forgot the highlights.
Did you forget? Okay.
I need to put more.
There you go. Well, you got it. That's what my only comment would be, is if I could just tell by looking at it, if I bring up that color picker and I start moving that around, we're at about a 50 or 60.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing. If you have light that's coming in here, you know, and hitting from one side. Heck, you can almost just take a fuzzy brush, right? Love that fuzzy brush. And if I just come in here, not that bright, but if I start popping some of these little areas and get some little highlights on here, it's going to start to pop the piece a little bit more. Especially if you have this area in the foreground in front of it, you know, that should be, can be a little bit richer on top of that. Okay, then you have oops. Okay, then you can get in here and push a little bit more of that light sort of softly coming in through part of here, getting into the castle. You know, especially down here on the ground. You know, remember light casts, it's going to hit part of that ground, and then when it hits that ground, if we come back over, and then you get some, you know, some of those good highlights in here, it's really going to brighten some of this up, especially part of these rocks are going to be lit pretty good. And it's going to establish a little bit more of a focal point inside your piece.
Yeah.
Okay? Versus, deselect. Oh, I didn't put it on another layer, my bad. So, my fault. I was going to show you the difference between them. Okay? So that's it. Good work, Tito. Really nice.
Thanks.
Hats off to you. You did a great job on the assignment. You brought it up. The tones are looking really good. The values are working. Just a couple little adjustments, little things to add in there. Okay? All right. Now we'll go over to Andrew's. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Welcome back. So let's take a look at what you have here. Okay. Huh?
I only have two.
Okay. All right. Yeah, give me the third one. So what's your, as we get into this, what's your thoughts on this? Do you see an area of weakness or concern?
The rock could be sharper.
Is there anything you're like sort of struggling on that might have been a little frustrating towards you? Area that you want to improve?
Just the back part of the castle,
Mm-hmm.
behind the wall, maybe a little more detail.
Okay. All right. So there's a couple things I noticed looking at this. One of them, there's a couple. Let's talk about the design of the castle first. Okay. So one of the things that I noticed looking over at this is there might be a little bit of a perspective issue happening here. Let me go ahead and let me adjust it. Let me grab my ruler really quick here. I know you have a little bit of a sort of a Dutch tilt on this. The one thing that I noticed is that it looks like your horizon line's about right here. Okay, let me try that again a little bit darker. Your horizon line's about right here on the piece because it looks like these are converging to about right there, let's say. Okay. One of the things I noticed that feels a little off to me is that I know what you're doing from a top view. You have like the front view of the castle, then this recedes back this way. But this side feels so much pushed, like it's just going to one vanishing point here, and this vanishing point seems to be a lot further away. So if we come back to so you sort of have multiple vanishing points, which is okay because you can have a structure from a top view that has a front wall like this, then the walls recede back, and then maybe house part of a structure. There's no reason if our camera's here, you have the road coming in sort of a one point, and then these wall structures go like that, right? And that's totally fine. You can do that. But I noticed that this side seems to really be much more of an angle tilt going down than this side is. And I don't know, you have symmetry in the castle. I might try to relieve that somehow by maybe making them match up because they feel very symmetrical to each other. But then that's one of the first things that I sort of noticed was that, you know, if there's that VP1 and then we're doing this and these walls are a little bit different. See, I think what it is that this is something I just caught. If I'm looking at the horizon line and that's the vanishing point, then if this comes down to here, okay, this line is receding back that way. Do you see that? It's going above the vanishing point. And that feels, above the horizon line. So if we look at the horizon line here, your wall line would have to adhere to that horizon line like that. It would have to be landing in front of it. If once it goes past the horizon line, it would be basically, I think what you're doing is you're elevating it with the rocks, where you're showing a rock formation that's building up here and then going up, and then it's building into it. The problem is that by doing that, it might be, it's creating this sort of line here, and when I see that line, it makes me want to have the horizon line here, right? Because if you look at it, that's a plane that recedes to a vanishing point, like right there on this horizon line, and then this right here is receding back to that point there too. See that? So technically, it's this sort of trick. You sort of have your walls here, wall 1 and wall 2, going back to this horizon line, but then you have this right here, the entrance, receding back almost in an endpoint right there, and you can see it right there, and that's on a horizon line here. So I'd find a way to basically try to fix that, and I think the fix in this would be to leave the castle walls where they are, mark this as your new horizon line inside your piece, okay, and then come in and just copy and paste, and instead of having this end right there, adjust the angle to where the VP's there. So now your road, see, just that little jump here of 1/2 inch turns your road into this angle. You see that? And then make it, the road, go accordingly to your new vanishing point, which would be right here, your main VP. That make sense? If you do that, that'll keep it a little bit more structured, okay? That's one thing I noticed right off the top. Another thing that sort of caught me on this, the rendering looks good, and you're having a great sensibility of light coming from left to right here, but the one thing that I got to sort of nail on this is you have an elliptical problem with some of your ellipses, okay? So if we come back here, again, this is one of those perspective things. If you come back here, and if this is your main horizon line, it's sort of a Dutch tilt that's going in here. Also notice that bridge, by the way. This bridge, so if this was the other horizon line that we had, that bridge is going downward to a whole another horizon line itself. See that? You got that one now, right? When I pointed out, you're like, why did I do that? Because if you have it all come off of here, off of that point, your bridge would be more like this then. It'd be at that type of angle, coming off of that main, okay? So, where was I? lost my train of thought there because I caught the bridge and I didn't see that before. So on the ellipses. So what's happening with your ellipses here is you got to think of them as pretty much as elliptical angles like a quarter. Okay, so if that quarter is slightly above, let me zoom in there. I'm gonna have this type of elliptical angle where I can barely sort of see on the ellipse. Once I get up here, I'm gonna see a lot more on that ellipse. Elliptical angle is changing. When I get up to here, I'm gonna start to see a lot more. So the problem I'm noticing is that some of your ellipses, they just feel like they're sort of a curve like that. And what we would call the angle of the ellipse. So if I draw a line from here to here, that ellipse feels identical to that ellipse. Do you see it? Okay. But remember that quarter. As this quarter raises and goes a little bit higher, and it goes higher and higher, we can see much more underneath that ellipse, and the elliptical angle is getting greater. Here, you're very close to it. You're getting it greater, but it's the way that it sort of tucks in and lands. And right now, I'm not getting that. Right now, when I look at that ellipse, it feels very identical to sort of this ellipse. Okay, that's something that I got to call you out on, because somebody else, a pro who's going to look at your stuff, they're going to notice that on certain areas in here. Okay. Another thing is scale. Look at the size. So look, this is it. And again, this is why I teach that perspective class here, the applied perspective. We talked about all this. So look at this guy here, standing, he's about here. Because look at the horse. If the horse is that tall, this guy here is about yay big to the horse, right? So if I recede, again, you got to pick your VP, because you have to go back to the main horizon line. So if the main horizon line's here, if I recede this guy backwards a little bit to about right here, and if I transfer his height over to right here, look at how tall that chain link is compared to him. It is the size of his body. Do you see that?
Heavy bridge.
Yeah, it's heavy bridge. And that's right, there are heavy bridges. But the point is that even with a heavy bridge like that, I don't know if the chain link would be the size of the person. So maybe you could scale down. I like the shot you have coming from the front there, but maybe that needs to be scaled down a little bit and a little bit shorter, a little bit tinier. Okay, that's one of the other things that sort of caught my eye. Okay, so the light feels good. You nailed it about, hey, if we have this level of detail here, why don't we have some of that detail in here? Okay, and actually, you could use some of this to your advantage very quickly, because all you have to do is get in here. I'm sort of a master at this. Copy and paste what you've already painted, right? Bring some of that over here, and you could transform it. You can stretch it down a little bit. You can use distort to match the other perspective, especially if there's a little bit more ellipse angle in there. Even if there's more of an ellipse, you can go to transform, you can go to warp, and you can pull the middle up a little bit more, and it'll make a little bit more elliptical shape. Okay, and then most importantly is that we can also just blend this in by taking an eraser, going down to about 1 or 2%, and just lightly come over and sort of blend some of this guy in. It doesn't have to be 100% match. You can just fade some of that in there, and heck, you can now come back in, put another wall over part of that you already have here. You can take advantage of some of the other stuff that you've rendered and use it to your benefit. So you did a really good job with this wall in here. So I can come in, take some of this. Oops, I missed a little there, but that's all right. So if I transform this, I can make it a little bit smaller. Okay, and hold on a minute. Let me see. I was debating on if I flipped it. I wanted to see what would happen if it looked like it was going maybe the opposite way, receding back. But let me flip it back. It's in the back here. So distort. If I bring that up above. So you could have, there can be another support wall up back here. And then what you can do is if you wanted to, just come back in and then blend that in a little bit more. So what I'm getting at is I'm using stuff you've already rendered. The local color. So now I can block some of this wall back in here. You can blend some of that in, and if we match it all the way to perspective, store it and bring that angle down a little bit more. Out in here, you could basically have part of your wall do this. You can just copy and paste what you have there, get the perspective right. So dictating that if your horizon line is right here and that's your new vanishing point, and you come back and that's that angle for there, then you can make sure you match that angle in about there, right? So if I hit transform again, that's weird. I don't know why it's going all the way over there. So that angle needs to go up a little bit more. Bring it down here. So I could even use part of what you've already done in there. And I could just block in the rest of that wall, and I could even have it go down here and even drop. What I mean by drop is I could have part of the angle maybe come here, drop a little bit, go back here. Then I could copy paste, let's say, part of this guy right here. And you could bring part of that guy back in here, get him a little bit smaller, cheat it. It's closer to the light, so I can go to the levels here. I'm just using parts that you've already used in your castle, and I can use them to block some of them back in over here. See what I'm getting at here? I do this all the time. I paint one section of something, and I copy and paste something over, and then I could come back, and then I could easily add to it. So imagine now if I came over here, okay, give me a second, and put all that on the same layer, I think. Give me a second, let me find out what layer. Layer 6 there. Where'd I put the red on? Layer 4? Nope, 5. There we go, so come back to 5, erase some of this. Actually, see if I can take that wall you already did and shift it back in the opposite direction where it drops like that, going back to your vanishing point like so. Go to levels, just darken it a little bit more so it's the dark side. All right, let's try that again. Sorry, I'm getting a lag on Photoshop. Going to erase and it's not working. So I want to drop that, bring this wall down about here, erase some of this. So you get what I'm doing here. I'm just using some of what you have, and then I could block in parts of the rest of this very lightly, and then get some of this to blend back in. And now I have part of another wall going off of part of what you had already drawn and painted in there. Okay, that's if you want to add more to it. I just think that could add a little bit more to part of the structure in the back there, having a little bit more. And even if not, even if it's just a simple copy and paste job of you putting in some other details and getting some other information, even if you don't want that wall to go in there, that's fine. But getting some more in here, I know, and you sort of nailed it when you said you looked at it, if there's all this cool detail here and here and even into here, this isn't that far behind back here. So we're still going to have this area defined up in here, and there's going to be some other sweet information about what's transpiring. The last thing in here outside of the perspective and the fix is all of this from here all the way through here is just empty, and it's absolutely fantastic for you to get in there. Look, you can have some mountains in the back, an atmospheric perspective, you know, that are almost encapsulating part of this location. And then what you could do is you can even use some of these to your advantage. So you could have a cloud in front of this one, okay? And then you can have a cloud behind this one like this. So then you automatically create depth that way. Does that make sense? This cloud overlaps this shape. This one's behind this mountain. And then behind this mountain, you can have another lighter cloud that's sort of like that, and you create a lot more depth inside your piece. And not to mention, even outside of all that, there's nothing behind this structure itself. By using clouds behind there and getting them to print in there, that's going to be a huge advantage for you, especially when you have an area like you have this nice shadow area here. Coming in here and having a cool set of sort of clouds behind there and getting them a little bit smaller as they recede can create a lot of depth, especially right behind there. I don't have the layered file, so it's a little hard for me to get in there and paint all that in, but on your layered file, just get in here and throw a nice white cloud right in the back there. And you'll see it immediately sort of pop the castle forward, okay? All right, good work. Couple little adjustments and you're good to go, okay? This one, what are your thoughts on this?
Since the background, like ripped in the earth,
Uh-huh.
was kind of difficult to mount it to be rendered for.
So one of the things I noticed is it gets really dark right here, and that's okay. That's going to be your main focal point, right? We get that. We see it. We come in here and notify it. What I notice is that it feels like in part of this piece, we just get a little bit, you have this cool castle, and it's protective. It's on like this cliff, but then it's all just sort of, this is sort of flat. You know what I mean? And then you're right though, we get in here and then you have this sort of, you have this thing to deal with here. That shape is very similar to that shape. Do you see that? Compositionally?
I do now.
Huh? You do now? Yeah. So one of the things that I might recommend is that when you're looking at this, there's a couple of things. First of all, let's talk about the render quality. The render quality is fine. Okay, light, you have a good sense of light. The light's coming through. The shadows in here might get a little dark because you're getting pretty close to a black, and black can flatten it, but at the same time, it's creating a lot of contrast right in that area, which is boom, that's immediate focal point. The thing I noticed is you have, so look at this, you have this sort of lump mass here, which is about the same lump mass as here, which is about the same as there. So you create these sort of three, and then even if you look at this, you look at the distance from here to here, look at that distance is very similar as that one is, right? So what I would do on this is we need to enhance part of the silhouette around this main structure. And one of the ways I would do that is by overlap. So this is you have this castle. There's no reason why you couldn't have parts of the rock come over and overlap like this and be like this protective, rock formation that comes around part of this and then breaks down into some boulders around it, and you have these sort of protective arms on top and around here. By doing that, we create a little bit more overlap that also feels like it's a hand cradling part of that castle, being very protective. It also allows you to get in here and have some large boulder shapes and go into small and medium shapes around it, which is going to match part of the environment. The other big thing is it's going to do is it's going to really push the overall silhouette. It's because now you're going to be able to get in here and you're going to be able to take, hold on, brush, let's go back there. Can't get it to go. There it goes. Okay, sorry, it's just the recorder doing that. So you can get in here by having some of these shapes overlap a little bit. Part of your structure. You're also enhancing part of the silhouette that's around part of this. And then if the light's coming this way, it also gives you a play off where you can have a couple more highs, and you have some other areas to put highlights on against darks, and it can make some of this pop up. And by adding these little elements in here, you're now enhancing part of the structure. So down here, we need to make this a little bit less, okay, because you have almost the same shape right there. One thing that you could do is you could literally just sort of cut this off. You can bring this down and sway it down, or it like curves this back in to part of that structure. And then you could ditch, so it feels like this castle's up on a mountain, okay? Then I noticed this too. Look at the distance from here to here is almost the same from there to there. It's sort of like right in the middle. So if you wanted to, if you grab this castle, pulled it down a little bit, raise the height of the castle. So if you grab this whole structure here, brought it down a little bit, it would raise the height of the castle, which would make the castle the dominant reed and then make it the primary silhouette shape, okay? Then come in here, and all this stuff that you did right in here, I would just bring this all together into one, like it's one sort of cliffside. Maybe there is this, but it comes in here and this just becomes one sort of reed in here, let's say. And then come back over here where you have all this and just copy and paste your mountains, get some of this to read like it's back down in here. Oops, stamping the wrong layer. Like there's more mountains sort of in the back here. Okay. I didn't mean to paint over this. Get that block back in there. So do you see what happens now? You killed part of that shape that was in there. It's not mimicking it. And this is swaying you back down in here into part of your composition. You still have that battle, though, of half and half here. So if you have this, gosh, I could probably just do it here. If I just grab this really quick. I should have, hold on a minute. Let me merge these layers together. Okay. So what I've done now is, I don't know if we have the original composition anymore. Let's see. So that's where you were, see how much higher it was? I just brought the castle down a little bit, raised the height of it, and now when we're looking at this in terms of visual reads, okay, you now have this shape inside your piece here. Okay. That is the largest shape now. See that? This is secondary, and even this is sort of divided and it's smaller in the back. So one of the things I wanted to push was really magnifying. Say right here, it's not. We have that, the distance from these, from right here to here is equal from right there to there. Okay, it's actually creating a line almost in the middle of part of your composition. By grabbing your castle, bringing it down a little bit more, okay, and then making it taller, it's now making this the primary read with the primary amount of shape, okay, enhancing the silhouette. A couple of little adjustments. I think that's a nice piece, but I think that'll bring that sort of to life, especially on a composition battle. It's going to make it a little bit more interesting, and then definitely get rid of part of that shape. I don't have the original file anymore, but that original crevasse or lake thing you had underneath there, it's just one of those things. If it's not adding to the composition, just take it out and then make it more to your benefit. Okay, nice work. You have a good sense of light. You have a good feeling to what's happening inside your piece in your work. It's just getting in there and adding a little bit more detail. Watch the perspective. That might be is that a battle for you? Something that's new, a little bit different. So whenever you do a drawing, show it to me. I'll come by and I'll take a look at it, and I can just check the perspective to make sure that it's accurate, make sure it's working. Okay? Thank you, sir. All right, let's go to next here. What time are we at? We still have some time. We're still good. So we did Tito. We got Andrew. Next over here, we have C. Kim, Christine. All right. All right, let's take a look at this one first, Christine. It's feeling pretty good. I like it. One thing I'm noticing in here, we have a little bit of the scale set with that, having those stairs up there, but it doesn't really identify exactly what it's going to be. I would love to see what happens on this if you turn off that line drawing that you have. Because right now, you're getting your tone that's holding together pretty good, but your line's getting pretty thick in a couple areas. Like, look back in here. Let me see if I can jump up there a little bit closer. Look at your line weight right here. Do you see that? It's still pretty darn thick right there, and it's a lot thicker than some of the line that you have here in your foreground. So, again, when I review something, I tend to look at it from a couple different point of views. When we're doing these, we're looking for composition first. I think the composition's working very nicely. There's good grouping in there. There's a good transition. It's this nice sort of this repeating circular composition that's receding us back. I think that works really fine. In terms of the light, I do have that feel. The light is coming in at an angle. However, though, one of the things I'm wondering is this the separation and then light is coming behind that? Okay? And so if that is, then, or is it, because this is where I get a little lost right here, is if light is coming in at this angle, right, then why is this so dark in the back here? You see that spot right there? I would make that a lot lighter because you have light coming in from the right-hand side that's coming in, because all your highlights, you have highlights here, 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 here. All these are indicating the light's coming at that direction, but then it wouldn't be that dark right there, right? You'd have light sort of moving across. So I'd watch that. I would determine, because this almost unites a little bit with this, but remember, this area right here is supposed to be in part of your foreground. Okay, so what would happen to this piece to me, and if I'm your art director, I would come in here and I would just do something like this. I'd take a look at part of this. Oops, wrong brush. You already see what I did right there? I just darkened this object is closer to you in the foreground, and then wanted to create a little bit more light coming through that passageway. In fact, if you want to, I know one of the things you might be worried about is if too much light comes there, it sort of flattens it, right? And that's right, that can happen. So something that you can do, so on this, watch, here's another option. If I come back here, and if I erase some of this, and you get the feeling of light rays sort of coming down. This would be a good benefit for when you have light rays, because by having rays of light, it allows you to have some of those other areas behind the stone stay dark in their sort of natural color. Okay, so a couple things you could do. I don't know, I used to have light ray brushes. See if I have anything on here, and I don't. That's all right. So a couple things to do for light rays really quick. Sometimes you can just, I do this at like a rotation. If I take a good, nice gradient brush, hold on a minute, I'm zoning out. Like, where'd my brushes go? So if I take this brush here, and if I do something like this, I can do it on another layer here, where I'm going to get a little bit lighter, and then I'm going to sort of hold down shift, try to be very soft, and then I'm going to come in here and like 0.4, and then, oops, let's try that again, 0.5. Try to get very light sensibilities in here, some of these rays. And what I'm going to do is, this is on a separate layer, and then I can, since it's on a separate layer now, I can treat it like light rays, and I can rotate it, and I can get them to come in sort of right about there, let's say. Okay, and I do this all the time, especially with opposite layers. I can erase part of this that's going behind here, like that, and see that that allows me to still keep some of the darker values on the rock in the back, but then it's going to allow you to get in there, because you're going to have light side, dark side. So to me, if light's coming in this way, some of your light side, dark side here is a little messed up in the back there. You should have some of these dark values coming up on top. And back here it should be a little bit darker. Some of that should be being hit. You should have some highlights hitting up in here, some highlights here. I would rethink part of your facades on here. So it gives you that feel, the light sort of just billowing through between that canyon, hitting that area. You see that? Okay, let's see how it looks up there. Yeah, it's a little brighter up there than I intended it to be, than it is on my screen, so I can lower down the intensity just a little bit. But let's just go back to part of the difference. Okay, so having a little bit more light coming in there, darkening this front, because now I do question that big chunk of dark in there, right? And then I would also, again, like I mentioned before, turn off your line. Turn off your line about 30 or 40% lower, and then go in there and render a little bit more to get those values and those facades to pop, and then let your line weight dull. I mean, look back here at how thick your line weight is, and back there it's super thick. That stuff should be lost and found edges completely going back there. We shouldn't have that dedicated line. So composition looks great, rendering's looking good, just maybe a little bit of a light adjustment, darken this foreground a little bit. One other thing that I thought about mentioning is if you had a little bit more, you know, if you have this entryway here, what if we see a little bit more of indication that maybe there's a pathway that leads us somehow up here to the front, and it could be lost and found edges breaking up and then getting a little bit lighter. Maybe part of this pathway comes up here to the foreground, right? Maybe part of it overlaps some of this, and then we might have a little bit more reflective light in here. Then you can get the scale of somebody here to pop. So I don't have it, these aren't my full brushes. So if I had like a little horse and carriage or whatever, or a little person that's standing up here in the front, like so, it's going to give me a little bit better idea of the height and scale, and then you have this path that goes down. You might even see a couple of these people walking like back here, getting into part of that city. Do you see that? So the scales can help you as well. And remember, I gave you guys some of these brushes that you can use as well. Before, imagine there being like a little cart in here, like someone's hauling this little cart. If I transform that, flip it to the other side, move it towards that white is. Maybe they're sort of bringing a little cart through there or whatever. You know what I mean? Just something to indicate a little bit more scale reference. But definitely going from here, you're going, look, you're passing all this from here, going down into here, and that wraps and curves. Right now, we're not, Zoo, when, one of my buddies and great concept artist for Sony, he made a comment about always show the travel and the distance. You have a tremendous amount of distance from here all the way through into here. You have this whole valley, but nothing's really indicating any scale changes there. And something else you can do on top of that in terms of scale is just simple. Let me see if I can draw this in a little bit more of a red so you can see it. Is something I like to do in my work all the time is rocks. Give me a second. Let's go back to that red brush I had. Here we go. So these guys might be walking here, and there might be like a large rock, like here on the side with like another boulder, maybe sort of like in here, and they might be up on this sort of hill right here. But then when we look back here, there might be another rock that's a lot smaller, and it's getting smaller, and then we get a better feel for what's happening in terms of part of the grid back there. And then what happens when we're back in here? There might be a little bit smaller detail, and that right there is going to help because we're showing scale of a rock here, we're showing it getting smaller and getting smaller as it recedes back there. And heck, I could even push it even more. What if that rock was like this, overlapping in the foreground, and it's really huge, and then here it's a little bit bigger, and here it gets a little smaller, and here part of the rocks go into the trail. See, that does a lot to communicate more in scale and transition of foreground, midground to background. Okay? Cool. I mean, just that to me makes the piece work a lot nicer and gives it a lot more information. Okay, but watch that line quality in there. It's getting really thick. Okay? All right, and then with these, let's see. I like the one on the left. You got to define these guys, though, the characters here. They're going back. You need to really lose part of that line and paint in part of the value. Right now, the line is flattening part of the piece in general, okay? In fact, I'd lose quite a bit of that line and get this castle to hold itself together. This is killing you right here. Having a black line like that on a white edge, and then the whole background sky here is completely white, I would make this more of a light gray so you can get some clouds in there. Skies are never white, okay? The sky color is a blue, and when you look at blue on a color picker, so if we pull this up and you go to a blue, even if we're a soft light blue like this, that's still like a 1 or 2% in value. Pure white is the color of clouds, which is moisture. So if you get this with a little bit of a gradient from dark to light coming down, it's going to give you the option to show some clouds in there, sort of popping out behind it. And then also about the light itself. If light's coming down in this direction and you're hitting some of these, if light's getting hit here, light should also be hitting this facade, might be hitting a little bit of that facade or right in here as well. I know what you're saying, that technically that's around the corner, but it could be a little bit lighter and then going to darker. And the same thing here is if lights, so you got to be careful on this. If you're telling me if this is, switch to a red. If you throw a shadow line coming in like this, going over those mountains, you're telling me that your light is coming down at that angle. That's indicating the direction, how the light's going to cast. So if that's the case there, when we get to here, you have this sort of pillar in the ground, right? Well, that pillar is also going to be casting a shadow that's going to be wrapping over part of that. In fact, you have this whole structure itself is basically this. It's basically a box, right? So if you have, light coming in through here, heck, this itself is going to be casting part of a shadow wrapping around. Then you're going to have the shadow of this castle casting over part of those rocks as well. And then you're going to have light hitting all right in here with light sort of coming down in this direction, matching that, okay? Right now, I'm not getting quite some of that feel in your piece. I would adjust part of that light, but you could change that angle. It's as simple. If you change that angle into that direction, light's coming more at that angle, coming down at this angle. So maybe now this castle shadow actually lightens, where it might just be wrapping around part of this because the angle of the light's changed. So you have a dedicated square or cube, and light's coming down at a particular angle it has to match. Okay? Might be actually somewhere in the middle. Might have a happy medium where maybe a little bit like this, where you have a little bit of that line wrapping, and then you can use that castle to your advantage, where some of it's just wrapping around the corner like so. Okay? And then again, if I just take a brush really quick, and let me take this fuzzy brush, let me go to a lighter gray. Let's go a little bit lighter. I made the mistake in not putting another layer on this. Let me fade this in first. Let me get rid of that white guy, and then here. So what I'm going to do is lightly come in here and sort of put a little bit of haze coming off the back, because that's part of that sphere that we have in the sky, right? We have a sphere we're looking up at, and our sphere is going to have a little bit of a natural gradation as it curves over on top of us as part of the sky plane, right? Just by getting this in a little bit more and flattening that down. Now let's see what happens if I can get in there, if I can get a cloud to be on top of that, and if I can get part of the cloud to read and blend in. Okay. Actually, let's just see what happens if we're there, so you see that? Now you can get some clouds in there to go behind the castle and make it pop out a little bit more. And all I did was put just a little bit of a gray tone with some white clouds on part of that. I didn't make it so white. And then by doing that with a little bit of the gray, that's also going to allow you then to pop a little bit more of your white highlights so they don't blend into the white sky in the back. Get rid of that thick line that's there and try to paint over it. Okay, see that difference? There, this is popping a little bit more. You're getting a little bit more room in here. This basically switched up the values. A little bit more highlights on there instead of the background sky being so bright and dominant. Okay, try that. All right, and then over here to the next one. So, the problem I'm noticing, do you know what it is on this one? First thing I notice, it's those ellipses on this dome. Something about it, I need to figure it out. It doesn't quite look right. Something's happening right in here that doesn't feel correct to me. And so I think it's a perspective thing. And part of it is relative to this right here, the ellipses. This ellipse under here actually feels greater than the ellipse above it. See that? This has more curve to it right in here, and this has less curve. That even has less. See it? So it'd be the opposite way, right? Because your horizon line on this piece is down here, and you need to sort of nail it down. Actually, got to be careful of that too, because I'm noticing you're telling me if these ellipses are curving this way. So that means your horizon line somewhere in here is about down to, I don't know, probably about there. Okay, and then you have these are at angles so we can see on top of them. So if I'm going up at this direction, I would be able to see if that's going up a hill at an angle, I'm going to be able to see on top of part of that wall. Okay, and then you got to be careful because look at here, from here to here, your ellipse angle right in here is like that, and then here, your ellipse angle is about there, and then here, you go to smaller, there you're smaller, here, so see that? Here you're very thin, which is good. So there's an issue between these right here and your ellipses. If you're gonna throw out something, even this top ellipse right here, look at this, this is almost flattened. It's almost straight across right here. So that's the first thing I noticed right off the beginning is those ellipses have some major issues on them. In terms of composition, it's great. It's a nice circular composition. We're very surrounded. You have sort of a pathway that comes in here. The light, if you have light coming this way and light coming that way, that means if we bring this together, your light source is coming up somewhere from above here for shadows to be coming out like that, right? I covered that in the applied perspective class. So that doesn't feel right to me right now, and this is one of the problems I have is I'm looking at this big dome shape, which is a huge visual read, and I can't tell where the light's coming from. Okay, it feels like the light should be coming sort of hitting down in this direction, maybe like this, and it's hitting here, but then here you have light casting over the outside there. Do you see it? So if light's casting over this direction, you're telling me light's coming from this way. And then that would make sort of sense if, or maybe it's coming directly above and it's hitting here, it's wrapping down, but then here it would sort of wrap down. And then if that was correct, if light's coming down this way, you're not going to have shadows casting out like this at all. It's going to be totally different. If anything, light, you got to really, so we get all these arrows in here, we have to really identify where the light is. Because remember, the sun is so far away, it's coming down, it's going to be a parallel light source. So if our light is coming down in this direction in this parallel, part of that light's going to be hitting across here. If we draw parallel lines going across, it's going to hit here, it's going to wrap over part of this, and then the rest of this is all going to be in dark value the way that it is. But it needs to match. Right now, that light right here, I'm not getting that feeling that light's hitting here and casting over this like it is on the other objects. Because this here feels like the brightest part of that highlight. On that, it feels like light's coming this direction. So you're lighting sort of all over the place. And here, your light is hitting here and you have a shadow on that side. So you need to really nail down on this piece exactly where that light's coming from and how it's, because right now it's having a drastic effect on what we're reading in here. You have a dedicated highlight that's sort of here, light side, dark side, but then your highlight's here. But then here, this feels like, if I pull up the color picker, okay? That side is in shadow, that side is much brighter. Feels a little bit brighter over here, especially right there. So, I don't know, that's a tough one. So if we were to draw a three-dimensional light arrow, and you're thinking your light's sort of coming down like this, at a third dimension like that, there's an issue if it's hitting there. Why isn't it hitting here? Why isn't it hitting parts of that? Why isn't it hitting part of that dome going on the top here? That feels sort of sloppy to me, is having that off. The lighting feels like it's a little out of whack. It feels sort of rushed. And I know you can do a better job on that, on the lighting area. So that would be my comment on that. This actually feels just sort of like there's just someone took a fuzzy brush and hit this whole area. Oops. Right in here, it just feels like there's like, bam, like that was hit with a fuzzy brush. and that's the focal point, but it's not addressing any of the real detail of what the light would be doing in there, okay? So I definitely get in there and adjust some of that and make sure it's all matching up to the world that's around it, okay? All right, thank you, Christine. All right, next. We have Daniel Bruno coming up here. All right. Was that what you did in your color version?
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's working pretty good right in there. The only part that feels weird is like, I'll get to this more on a tone level, but just looking at the color, it's a nice soft feel to it. There's some cool, you have some nice warms against some cools in here, but be careful, some of this right here feels like it's getting a little muddy. You sense that in the color world? You could have, if this was a little bit more cool in terms of a shadow, it would really pop part of that area. Okay? But just be careful if you get too much. But here I see a little bit of violet getting in there, right? Like you're throwing a little bit of cool in there. Don't be afraid to maybe just punch up a little bit of that shadow, or do the shadow separate and then go in and just go to hue and saturation or color balance and add a little bit more blue to it. You can gradate part of the shadow that's in there. But I like it. I like you're doing a good job with the warms, and this is definitely a good focal read. Watch this here. It feels like a big cloud right behind, right there. I bring part of this blue, and actually a little tip, part of the sky when it dips down really low to the horizon turns into a turquoise. It's like a turquoise at the very base. My buddy Chuck Volmer from Disney taught me that little trick. He's like, whenever it drops, it's like you're going to have that area of turquoise, and then it fades up into blue up above, and that's how you tend to see skies. And if you take a picture of any major sky cloud and you notice that on a normal day, you'll see it where it goes in a little bit of turquoise down there, okay? And it also gets a little bit lighter, but for the most part I think you're doing a good job with this. Let's examine what part of the tonal read is. See here, you're getting that white against that dark. To me, your read isn't to be right up in here, but it's actually these characters coming up through this, and I think you did a good job on a couple different scenarios for this light. Is it we identify with the characters here, and having the little light come over part of this does a really good job of identifying it. But the light's also coming from the left here, right? So if you wanted to, you have these forests and these trees here. You could also create this sort of cool pattern that's maybe coming in here of some trees as well that also have a little bit of shadow casting through and landing on part of this, right? That might be a way to punch up and have light against dark, especially when we get up in here. But for the most part, I really like you have this really nice, soft, grainy feel to part of the illustration that feels really quite wonderful and very settling in here. I think it looks very nice. Okay, watch your light. If your light's coming at this way and hitting part of the surface, part of that light also might be very lightly hitting a little bit of that bridge going across right there, and that's just going to help a little bit more contrast for you. Okay. Just getting that weird sort of color read to it. Let's push that across right in there. All this sort of comes together in there. Okay. It's very nice. Okay. It's a good piece. Just wonder if I come in here and if I flatten this down a little bit, make it a little softer, paint a little bit more on top of this, get rid of that pure white. What's really cool in this piece is I like the way the clouds are working. All in here, it's quite wonderful, and then we have another like castle structure way in the background that's sort of fading off. Okay, but I am wondering, you notice how dark it is right here? You're almost at like a pure black. Do you sense that, Daniel? See it right there? That's in the midground. Lighten it up a little bit. Bring it back just a little bit more. Don't bring it all the way to that pure black. Just lighten it up. Remember, pure black can flatten things. Becomes a graphic element. Uh-oh, I'm grabbing off, getting the color read in there for some reason, not the black and white read. kind of flatten out just a little bit of that black. So it's not so, you know what I mean? It's pretty strong in there. Just a little bit, dull down that gray in the back. See that? Just what it does to flatten it out just a little bit. Just doesn't make it so dominant and so harsh. Okay? Good work. Nice piece. All right. Part of the clouds in the very back feel like a photo? Is it? Okay, blend it in a little better. Blend it in. Those smudge brushes I gave you guys, there's a couple tools in there that make it, you can paint on top of it and make it look like you painted that, or blur it a little bit so it doesn't feel quite like a photo. The other comment, overall, I think it feels pretty good. But if this is that bright and it's hitting right here, the distance from here to here, just right over here, that's going to be a little brighter there too. Do you see that? That's going to be punched up a little bit more over here, where some of that's going to be hit. Some of this is going to be a lot brighter in here. You're going to have going across some of those streaks there, right? They're going to be hit more with light. Even parts of this, if this is that bright, I mean, even this is going to be like getting hit a little bit more as well. That plane's almost blending in with that plane behind it. So just pull this front plane. Is that like a happy face there? Or a frown? Was that intentional? Okay. I sort of noticed it. I'm like, I'm sad. Like right there. And then maybe you can bring out this rock facade a little bit more. And then have that fall back a little bit more in shadow to get that front facade to pop a little bit more. Okay? Because look, if that's that bright right there, then that should be a lot brighter there too. I mean, that's further behind it, and that's getting hit with a pretty good amount of light, right? So if that's going to be hit, some of that's going to get hit as well up in here. Oops. Maybe up on there a little bit more. Okay. And then I'd even watch. That's almost so bright. Just want to dull it down just a teeny bit. Get the clouds drop back there a little bit. Fade some of those guys in. I almost want to come in. Let me see if I can. I'm on a whole nother layer here. Let me see what happens if I do this. Duplicate, layer. Turn that one off. Let's go to smudge. Let's take our smudge. You can use a couple different ones. Look back here, you can even see like every cloud between it, right? Just get in there. Sort of flatten some of that down, blend it in a little bit. Let that drift in, that's way back in there in terms of detail, right? Be soft and sort of fade into the environment. And then I still like the idea of taking a little bit of a scratchy brush. Getting some of this to blend in a little bit more. So it's not so hard edge. Does that make sense? You can easily make it feel like it's a painting itself just by going over it. Almost just want to blur it. If we just real quick, if we come in here under Gaussian blur too. Where am I looking? I need my glasses. Where's blur? Gaussian blur. I forgot we're all in one layer. wondering if we blur it back and try to make it drop more in the back so it doesn't look like it's so. See how sharp it is? It's way in the back there in the clouds. Let it fade back a little bit. Okay? Cool. And then just adjust a little bit of that lighting. That's it. I think that'll work for that guy. Okay, good work. They're nice pieces. Done a good job with it. Now on this one, is that all photo bash too? Okay. It looks a little bit like photos ran under that one filter. There's one of the filter options. It's like a polarized or whatever. It has that scratchy grain look. I would get in there. You know what's funny is that actually reminds me of when I was a kid growing up, like a picture out of an Encyclopedia Britannica of a location. You know what I mean? It has that sort of grainy published look to it. I might get in there and just try to get a little bit more, painterly brush strokes. The thing with photo bashing is it's a great tool. It speeds up your convenience, but you want to try to paint over and bring some of you into it. And you can do that with texturing and with some brush strokes. For the most part, the perspective feels spot on about it's matching, but you need to get in there and also give a little bit more. It almost feels like an old picture from Encyclopedia Britannica back in like the 60s of a St. Petersburg, or some, view in Florence, right? So I'd go in there and just adjust that a little bit more. Okay. And that was the tonal version of that, yeah. Yeah, definite. I mean, look at this. Nice with the light coming in here, hitting right in here. Light against dark. Just make sure the light feels like it's coming from directly above. It's hitting here and here. Is this a different element on the photo bash? From this side? Oh, gotcha. There's something else there. So light's coming in right like this at an angle. And then it's hitting here, bypassing some of that. What about this back here? Is that part of the original bash?
They're all different plates.
Okay. Okay. My thing about this plate here is this plate in the back. So let me just draw with it with my brush here. Okay. Is this shape right in here. Oops. Let's get a little bit darker. That shape right there is not adhering to the same light conditions that the other pieces. So you need to get in there and match that up. So that's a huge thing. Once you get all those different images or parts of plates stacked on top of each other, make sure the light's all matching. Because look, if this thing is getting hit by such nice bright light, it's creating that nice rollover on top of that shape. You have a lot of round shapes here with light that are going to be getting hit sort of the same way. Rolling over all down that side, right? Okay, light could be hitting parts of here, and you got to figure out exactly, is it going to hit here and like roll over? Matches. I mean, look, light side, dark side. Okay, just here that happens to cast a little bit of shadow over that, but light side and then dark side. So here you're going to have to get some of that light side and then dark side happening there to match the rest of that piece. Because right now that plate in the back there isn't quite matching what's there. Okay. A little adjustment. Okay. Did I miss anything on there? Those all of them. Okay. Good work, sir. I don't mind that. Here's my thing with the kit bashing, right? Or the photo bashing, I should say. If you photo bash, that's okay, but that one felt too much photo. Didn't feel enough. And the light wasn't matching. You have to match. That's why it's sort of a hard subject matter, and it works a little bit easier. Some people that have a little bit more experience in working in tone and light, it's going to come across part of the bash. But a huge part of that photo bashing is the blending. The blending has to feel like it is a separate. You know what I mean? So it doesn't. So no one can look at it and be like, "Hey, that's all from the same world or whatever." Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, Serena. We'll look at Deborah's. Let's do Serena's next. All right, Serena. Didn't we talk about this one on the top already? A little bit, right? Yeah. So we're still missing a little bit of that light coming in. See it? Feel like I could be punched up a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of a couple highlights here, but it doesn't quite, like if light's coming down here and even hitting some of this, shouldn't this be lit up as well in here, right? Some of that dirt and stuff. And then you have the light side, dark side, right? So light side, dark side. What about this right here? That guy is right on the side, is not getting any light whatsoever right there. So I don't know, I might go back into this one and work on part of that. And I thought we were talking about maybe, see, this is tough. You have, this feels like a shadow casting this way. So that means that if light is coming up directly above, sort of coming down like this. So if light's coming down in that direction, it's hitting here, that's casting a shadow. But then how come this isn't getting hit right in here with highlight? And if light's coming directly down on top of us like this, you might have light that's rolling around part of those shapes, okay? And then this needs to be, you have all this area in here that should be sort of peppered ground with rocks, detail, a path. And that right now is all just super fuzzy. It's not painted in, you know what I mean? Here, there's some painted in, but that's over there. I mean, you don't want, you're sort of pulling my eye back over here with that detail. Your focal point, I think almost what you need on this is sort of to define that this is rock and some other formations down here, and then get a dedicated path coming in here. Because you have a couple characters that look like they're sort of floating. You have some characters here, right? Or are those rocks? Huh? More rocks? Okay. So if they're more rocks, you got to be careful. They almost don't feel like they're attaching to part of the ground, and then here they're sort of fading off a little bit. There has to be, those feel like first I thought there were people or something floating going in there. If they're rocks, they have to adhere. I would have like a larger rock here pointing me into the direction of part of that castle, and then after that large rock, I might come back here and then have another large rock down in here, and then I would overlap where we get down here. And if that's a path, yeah, see that? That looks like a path, right? The path doesn't lead to the front door of the castle. It's leading to here to the middle. So I'd make your path look like it's coming perhaps this way, and then make the path sort of zigzag, like it's then coming back up and going to this mountain and then coming up this trail. Much more defined in there. And then with that, then you can mimic the rock. So maybe down here on the path you have another sort of large rock in shape in here, but this is overlapping part of that. And then you get down here and the rocks are maybe getting a little bit smaller, and you need a bunch of rocks. Maybe there's a bunch around, so it's not just flat ground, it's just sort of uneven surface. It's not good for fighting on. Heck, I would even tie those rocks into part of the castle and raise some of them up along here and make it look like part of this castle is built on this rocky ground. See what it's doing now for your detail in here? It's giving you all this wonderful information to make this drawing feel like there's a lot more contour and line happening in here in terms of the shape and the detail, right? If you do that and you get that line in there, then it's going to allow you to get light side and then dark side on all those rocks. And that's going to really get this area to punch up in here. Okay, but you got to be careful. You have some stuff in here. I drew quite a bit. I don't know how far I can go back. Let's see. Right about there, we're done. So this is all over the place back here. You have like a mountain, then you have something dark, you have something light on it. See that? I don't know what that is. You need to clarify that for the viewer. And if this is, like here, it feels like there's a gap in it. You see that? So if that's going to be a mountain range, make it like a mountain range, but here it feels like there's a hole in it right there. So part of your drawing is really rough, which is fine. There's energy in it, but you also need to tighten up a little bit of it. Some of it, I mean, look at this huge thing right here. Right? See it? It's like this. I know that's supposed to be a dinosaur bone, right? Okay? So if it's a dinosaur bone, you need to get in there and make sure this is light and dark side on that bone. It's not matching the same light that's coming down in this direction. That would be, this would be light and then this would be dark. So you need to make sure part of that's taken care of. Does that make sense? Okay, because if I were to come in here right now and just looking at what you already have, there's something, this should be, oops, not that bright. There should be light coming on there, light side, light side, light side that's matching part of this other detail that's hitting part of this world in this castle. That should be hit, that should be hit. And then if you had all those other rocks in here, got a rock facade there, rocks in here, rocks getting hit up in here, and all that's peppered in there, it's going to match up. So you're missing, some of that isn't quite matching up right now. And the other thing too is this other shape back in here, that feels like a rounded part of a flower. It feels like a petal. It doesn't quite feel like a bone. Bone has a certain feel to it. So I'd get in there and craft some of that out, okay? Get that identified, all right? That feels more like a rough paint to me still than getting to that finished level. Okay. I like this a lot right here on the left. I like what's happening here all the way up into here. The part that throws me is you have nice contrast in here. I like the stylization, but then what's happening between here to here is what is concerning me. Did you catch it? Okay, because you have darker here, right, in the lower spectrum, and then you go lighter, lighter, and then darker again.
Let's try to have like the rock with snow on it.
Okay.
I think maybe the values are on the snow.
Yeah, if you have snow, then get in there and define your rock pattern, and then get dedicated snow around there. But it doesn't look like you're looking at snow. Snow has very specific highlights and sort of fades across, and snow actually feels like this sort of white blanket. And the shadows on snow tend to only go to like a 30 or 40% as a gray, because you're talking about so much white already in the color of snow. When it hits up highlight, it's popping. This feels like dirt road and choppiness to me, but my main concern is the value here, how it gets so much darker right in here, and then here it's darker, and there's a part that's sort of, there's a battle happening between the front and the back here. Okay, we have that in battle against that value, and then that's in battle against that, so you need to fix some of that. Okay, and the same thing here on this one, you have your darker value here, okay, and a darker value sort of like up here and here, right there, but then this is very light up here in the foreground, right? So, and then these don't match, so light looks like it's coming that direction because I have light side, I have dark side. These aren't rendered yet, they're not finished. Those aren't quite matching what you have from before. And part of this might be me, it might be I'm being a little tough on you guys, making you do 3 of these, but I'm trying to get you faster, right? So did you just run out of time on that one? Yeah, you could just tell it's not rendered. You need to get that area done, and then you got to be careful. Like, look at, you have this tower here. Look at how dark that tower is compared to the other values here. Okay, it's like way in the back, it's super dark, and then here you got really pretty dark, and then you don't have that type of value. That's really close towards the front, but there's more of it right here in the midground. So I would really identify part of what's happening with the light in that one and the direction that's coming in. Okay? All right, thank you. All right, Deborah. Oh, that was weird. What just happened? Did I just duplicate Deborah's? I think I did by accident. Yeah. 1 second here, I made a mistake. Delete. Delete. One, two. Shows. All right. Okay. Okay, welcome back. Let's take a look. We have a couple more pieces here from Deborah. Okay. Let's take a look at what's happening here. All right. So I think a couple little things. Let's start here, Deborah. Overall, I think these look really nice. I think you're doing a good job. They have a nice illustrative quality to them. that's working together pretty well. One of the things that I noticed is when I first looked at this, and anybody else, if you see something, chime in. Again, I like, you as students are looking at it with a fresh set of eyes. Okay. One of the things I noticed back on this is it gets to be a lot of white back here, and then it's sort of competing with this area right here. Here's sort of a focal point of light and reflection, which looks good with what's up here. But then I'm wondering if we maybe end up doing one of two things: toning this down a little bit, okay, knocking it back a little bit, so part of the light feels like we're just staying focused in here, and that's our primary focal point. So what I was wondering, what would happen on this is if we come over here, if I take the fuzzy brush, and if I can come in here very lightly and sort of knock this down a little, punch that back a little bit, okay? Just to have it be a little bit lighter. Make a little bit of a haze. That way, it feels like part of these mountains might just be sort of fading in the back. I'm trying to get that other value to separate part of that mountain range in there, so we can still see it coming out just a little bit. Okay, just knock that back a little bit, and by knocking that back a teeny bit more, our focal point sort of readjusts up into here. One thing that you could do, I'm noticing as well, is silhouette's going to be key. And before I flatten this down, your silhouette back here in the mountains was becoming more defining than it was around part of the castle. So watch. Let me come back here. I'm just curious. If I take part of this structure that you already have here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to build up your castle structure a little bit larger, so there's more emphasis on, might need to go a little bit brighter, more emphasis on the silhouette shape and the visual read of the castle. Okay, let me see where I'm at here. Brush, go a little bit lighter. I'm just doing this super quick. Okay, so all I did was come in here and took some images of your castle, and what I'm trying to do is this, is you had a little bit of competition with that background mountain in the back there, right? So by enhancing part of this read of the silhouette of the castle. Let me get my brush back up here. So if we look at this, and if we see that this is the dominant silhouette shape, okay, that's going to be more interesting of a read than is this right back here. That becomes very interesting, that mountain range back there. So my thought is by dulling down a little bit of that mountain range, making the castle a little bit more interesting in terms of its overall silhouette. Oops, I didn't mean to merge. I had merged all those by accident, which is fine. Imagine if this even went a little bit taller up into here. This becomes the primary read. Now by knocking that mountain down, I'm not looking at the mountain. So you have a lot of contrast between here and here on that mountain, and this silhouette of the castle gets lost. Now by knocking the mountain down a little bit and then adding the silhouette of the castle, my focal point turns back into that castle. Okay? And I'm directly on it. So then if you got a couple highlights, I've noticed some of your highlights aren't getting anything brighter than like a 30. So you could really put a couple more highlights on top of that castle. Let's see if I just do that really quick on a layer here and see what we end up with. So let me just say, let's get that a little bit more. I get a couple highlights here. The light spreading over, maybe up here. And not just there, you also have all those really cool bushes, right? So I don't have, this can do highlights sometimes, it looked like. Maybe not that guy, where's the other? This guy can do it. Okay, let's see what happens here. Put this on another layer. If I knock that down a little bit and get it to blend in. Okay, so all I'm trying to do right now is, let's see where I'm at. Okay, so if I take all this off, right, we have great contrast in here. This gets washed off a little bit, and then there's lots of contrast in the back mountain range. Push the back mountain range down a little bit, enhance the silhouette of the castle, and then bring some more highlights to the castle itself and the bushes around there, and see what happens. We immediately now, our eye goes in and pops on the castle. See that? We're looking at the castle. The area behind it with the mountains going into the haze, that's just lost and found space. That's the castle delineating back, getting sort of lost and found, and just we want that to happen. Even with part of here, you got to be careful. We get lots of little details in here. Keep this dulled down a little bit, so this is our primary focus and our main visual read. Okay. The other thing too I might comment on is I like this. I like that bridge going across, and then you get into part of this, and I like that. But then right in here, this bridge feels so different not having the other arm to it. And you know, you have this. You have a really cool structure, this man-made. I would make them sort of match. In fact, the one thing I did notice is the scale on this doesn't quite match what's right there. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let me switch back to red real quick. So if I come back up here and we look at the distance, so look at this scale right here. The scale of this bridge goes from here across to here. That's that scale. Well, here it would be wider, but here now the bridge gets shorter. So it's sort of playing with perspective a little bit. This scale of this bridge should be, if it's that distance there and we come back to a vanishing point and you were to transfer part of that scale over, it's going to be about there. We come back over here. Part of that bridge should be about that thick there, okay, because it's much closer to us. There's a distance in space between here and here of anywhere between, if someone here is about 5 feet tall, walking, that can be 10 to 15 feet in distance that bridge is going to be getting larger. So what I do is I'd widen out that bridge a little bit and then look at the relationship of your space of the sticks in between. I think that works really nice. This bridge here matches up to the bridge you have up here, but then the one in the foreground doesn't quite. If this was a little bit wider like so, and then if that would also be a little bit taller, right? Transfer that scale height, bring it back. Then you want to match that same bridge. You would have something that's going to be more like this. Do proportional division. You know, if you cross this, you find the middle, you connect a line from there to that, it'll give you the next one. So that would be a height relationship there. Connect from the middle, the top through that middle line. So the next pole would be about there. Okay, we want these to match up completely. Okay, and then look at the relationship there. So if we come over to here to this side and you get this, yeah, it's going to be foreshortened. It's going to actually be sort of coming over right in front of us at a curve. That's fine. It might even come off and curve off screen like so. But then if we transfer that relationship, it's going to be about that thick there. It's going to be casting to about there, and then go about there, and so on. Okay, so I would get part of that bridge to match up, because right now that and the spacing does not match that and doesn't feel like it matches that. Okay, or another option is this. What if you completely take out the bridge and you just put like a rock mountain here that has something like, you know, a tree or something overlapping in the front, and then you just have a pathway that's going down here, then back down here you see that pathway getting smaller, and it just connects to this. So you're just taking us from a character standing here and then walking around that pathway to here, to here, to here, as they walk across to there. So that's another option, because it is a little bit, that is getting sort of foreshortened, and it's directly in front of us. Okay, so that's the first thing that I would do on that one, Deborah. Other than that, the rendering looks really nice, the piece looks nice, the composition is looking pretty good. One of the things I would watch also on the composition is you have almost equal parts. You have that chunk there, and then you sort of have that chunk there. They are becoming very equal in those terms. So one way to get rid of that is to think about that grouping, that if this is a foreground element and then this become grouped together, do you see that? Now that is a separate group there in front, and then this becomes a main silhouette read in the back. Okay, so it's a grouping thing, an organizing part of the grouping. So be careful of that. All right, let's go over here. Let's take a look at this. Same principle here in terms of the value. You have lots of whites in the back here competing against with the whites of the castle. Too many whites. In fact, not finished? That's okay.
I'm having trouble with the hills and with the city.
I think the hills in the city look great. Just do what you're like. This feels wonderful in here. The lights against the darks. Just come in here, and if I just take that brush again, if I take this fuzzy brush, remember the whites in the back that you have, like right. Sorry, the brush is too big. Right here and here, you leave those whites for highlights on the cloud that are, excuse me, that are reflective from the light coming down and hitting the clouds, right? So just come in here, just imagine, if I take this lasso, okay, if I take that right there, and if I just go back to my brush, hide this, and I'm just going to take this sort of gray, like 20 or 30 grade. I'm just going to go in here. I'm just going to knock this stuff down, bringing it down. In fact, you even get a little too dark on some of those values on the clouds. Knock this down to being in the back. Uh-oh. Whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't want that to happen. Okay. Sorry about that. And let me go back to where I was. There we go. A little too dark there. Little light haze coming in, pushing some of this in the back. Okay. Flattening some of this out. Flattening all of this down right in here. Now your highlights are reading on the castle a lot more. Now when you get in here and then you come back in and you want to put highlights on those clouds, okay? So now by having, let's put it on another layer here. And that's huge right now. Go to that bright white in there. So now what you can do, now if light's coming this way at an angle, have that hit part of the clouds. Okay? You can have the clouds being hit with light on parts of the top that are matching the parts of the light source. And by having, now I got to be careful, if I put too much highlights on this cloud here, that light against dark, we're not looking at the castle anymore. Bring a thick cloud like this over and put it right behind the castle. So if I have highlights hitting part of a coming off of this cloud here, I have some cool highlights like coming through here. Some of these spread up over here a little bit on some of those clouds. Get some of those highlights to come over there. See, now this is getting to pop a little bit more. Okay, so get this to dull down. You know, one of the things I was telling this to a couple of the other students the other day, one of our responsibilities sometimes when we're painting is in a graphic approach with lighting is to also create an area that is the visual read and the brightest for a composition. Oh, that's why. Forgot I had. Just putting a little bit more light on some of this. These bushes out here. Get hit with some highlights too. So again, so let's look at the difference here. And I did this on separate, so if it's too bright, I can dull it down a little bit, fade it in a little bit more like so. It's cool. If I merge these together, see that? All the whites right now are behind the clouds, and the clouds are like, they're popping out at us. Knock the clouds down a little bit, sprinkle some white highlights behind. Your subject matter and visual read and area of importance in this is that castle. We want to keep our eye on that castle with the lights in there. In fact, if light's coming down at that angle, you might even be able to hit some of this is all getting in highlights as well, right? So if I come over here with a brush and let's go back to here, imagine part of this row also leading us with highlights leading up to it. So I might have, let me go in here about 70. I might have some highlights coming across here, up into here, some coming up in here, hitting parts of these bushes, sort of sprinkling their way up to the castle. Let me come up to part of that. Highlights in there. That's how I would treat it. I would run it as these lights and shadow with light coming through here. Maybe part of this is just in shadow over here. There's no reason why you couldn't have a tall mountain in the back and part of this all in here is in shadow. Okay. That fades off a little bit more. Oops. Select. And then Now you have dark. Some of this fades back. This is all like shadow in here, right? And then you have light that's coming through. And some of your light is hitting this area up in here and leading us into the castle. And then part of that back here could also be in a light shadow as well. Okay? So it's just grouping it, because you also have this area of light. I know you weren't finished, but you start to get these little patches. You get a patch in here, patch over here. I know you're lighting them, but by doing this, by saying, hey, this is light now, I have a dedicated area you're looking at. Just by selecting this, making that little dark, there could be a huge mountain or trees over here that's creating a shadow over all this, and it's matching foreground, being a little bit darker, lights coming in here, hitting this midground, lighting this up, and then that might be in shadow, and then everything else from here back gets lighter and fades back into part of the composition. Okay, might be a little bit easier approach to get all this to lock up, because look, I mean, you have all this great detail in here. Why not bring us from here right up here and that wonderful silhouette shape of the castle? To me, that works a little bit easier, especially if you make it smaller and look, it's reading, versus here we get sort of locked up all over the place and we're ending up in the clouds. Okay, all right, and then we'll go back over here to this one. I think this one, the same thing. Watch, look at the brightness back here in the clouds. Super bright right back here. I know you have that light on. Knock this back a little bit and keep this locked up here on the clouds. In fact, I like this idea. It looks like a lantern's on, right? If there's a lantern on there, why not have another one on the dock? Why not bring this into part of the castle? Right now, this with that light around those clouds are getting so illuminated, and we're losing. We're going right up to the clouds, and we're leaving the castle area. The other thing is this guy right here. How many people saw this guy? He almost gets completely faded in. So if you want that character in there, give him a light source like he's carrying a lantern, have him be secondary, and have this be the primary read. Primary read is a light here, maybe a light here, a light here, maybe a light on inside, maybe a light up here. So where you have these little windows right up in here. Okay, so watch. Let me see if I can hit this really quick. First thing I'm going to do is knock some of this down here. It's just too bright. Just a much lighter gray tone. Get rid of those highlights behind there. It's just so bright back in there. It's taking all the detail away from the castle. And that glow around the clouds is doing it too. It's really flattening out part of the piece. Now if I come over here, and if I get in here, and maybe I have this area up in here, there's some lights on, let's say one's in there, maybe got a little bit light there, something's on in here, maybe there's another lower window here, whatever, you know, and then if this guy, maybe he's carrying something, he's got like a little bit of a lantern there. Okay, heck, there could even be part of a glow inside, like there's something on, there could be some come from the wall. By doing that now, it allows us to get some highlights sort of coming from here, spreading across. Okay. Oops. Coming out here. Now we can see that guy. That's still a little bright, but I can dull him down in a minute. There, now we're completely locked into what is happening here and on the castle, right? Where there's something going on in here, we see the boat, we see this Reaper guy coming through, versus here, we're up on the clouds. We've left. We don't even see this guy up here. So that'd be part of my suggestion into that. Bring this back into the castle, and on this one as well, you could also add more silhouette shape in the back here. Heck, you could just copy and paste one of these piers that you have, these tiers right in here, okay? Make it a lot smaller and lighter, and you can have a really cool sort of structure floating in the back there. You know? All about silhouette. Pushing silhouette, getting one area to read a little bit more than the other. Okay, what time is it? I gotta run in a second here, guys. We've gone past our time. So I'm just trying to punch up a little bit more of the silhouette in the back there. Making it look like there's a back wall to the castle. Adding that light in here. I bring all this together. I'm not going all the way up into those. Look at how bright that is. Such huge contrast right there. Contrast, the biggest area of contrast is where the eye will go no matter what. And unless you want us to look at those clouds, I wouldn't put it right there. I'd bring this back over here into that section. Okay? All right. All right, guys, welcome back. Let's take a look here. We need to finish up our reviews for this project. My bad. I didn't mean to skip anybody. I thought just we usually finish everything in one class, but with this assignment having 3 images per illustration, we had to do a little bit of catch up here. Okay, so who do we have here? We're starting off with, let's do Kevin's really quick. We have Kevin's shot here, and we have Kevin's shot, let me see here. Okay. All right, Kevin, let's talk about this really quick. Okay? Still with us back there? Good. Okay. So, I think your lighting, here's my issue, is that you have highlights on the castle, right? Coming in, but look at the value in the whole ground right now. Pretty much all of the ground. Hold on, some issue with my brushes now. They're not working. Okay, so when I'm looking at the ground, I'm not getting any spread. If light's coming, which light's coming from the left, right? Because look, you have a shadow line there, right? So you're telling me light's coming this way. You have a light side and you have a dark side to this object here. However, though, when I'm looking at the ground, there is no shadows coming from this whatsoever, coming over the ground. If there was a part of a mountain here, there could be a shadow that comes over this, and part of that shadow could be coming into here. Okay, and especially the biggie is light. There's no light hitting down on the ground anywhere. I have no indication of change of surface. If I look at this value right here, okay, and I come all the way to this value right here, they're identical. There's no change. So if light's coming from the left, this ground plane would be being hit and would be lighter. You have the same thing in the mountains here. Look at this mountain. It's all the same value. I have no facade change. You have to think about the angles and the facades, okay, of what's happening. So here, it looks like I have a little bit of a shadow in there. You see that? That's great. That's cool. And then light's coming down. It's casting that shadow. So that would work for here. But then, let's say if I have, and I don't know if that, it might just be part of the road, but that looks like it could be part of the shadow from that building, okay? If that's correct, then you need to be able to come in here, and you have to be able to say, so if that's shadow in here, oops, let's go to lasso. Say I'm going to select a little area like this. Okay, then I notice something else here. I notice the shadow of this guy, that little well you have there. The problem is the shadow of the well is casting this way, but there's no highlight on the well. You're not defining any surface changes, right? So if light's coming this way, you'd have highlights on there. So this shadow casting this way doesn't mimic part of what's happening on this castle. On this castle, the light, you have a shadow wrapping around, which indicates that light is coming down at an angle like this. This is telling me light's here in the front, where my finger is, sort of like where my nose is, coming into the piece. But you don't have any highlights that verify that. Okay, so on this, I mean, if I were to add light in there really quick, if light's coming down this way and there's a little bit of a shadow, we come in here and we take like a base white. If I go into let's go to my brush, Sorry, something's happened where I've lost my options for brushes here. Oop, not like that. I need some indication on this plane that there is light coming in and hitting, and then the light is receding and getting lighter. Right now I have none of that. Right? Light's going to come in, it's going to spread. Okay? You don't have any of that occurring in here. It's just one straight value, even down here, one straight value. You have a little bit of something here, but you know, if light was coming in, if I zoom into this really quick and I look at your guy right here, right? So three-dimensional object, right? Why do we call things 3 dimensions? Guys, there's a reason for that. So if I come over here and if I take the sphere, I'm going to do it real quick on this other layer right here. If I take a sphere right now, if I fill it, okay, fill it with foreground color right now, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to hide my sphere. I'm going to come and brush. I'm going to do this just super quick. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to put a little bit of a coarse shadow right in here. Let's get a darker value here. Let me see here. Why is nothing happening? Brush, 100%. Okay, now we're having a Photoshop hiccup where I'm in brush mode. I'm at 100%. Nothing's coming out, and I'm on pure black, and I'm on gray. Okay. Let me deselect. Select all V. Let's try it again. Sometimes there's a little bit of a hiccup with the way Photoshop's working, and I have no idea right now why. Oh, that's why it's on pin light for some reason. There we go. So look, really quick here, right? 3-dimensional. We have 3 facades. Okay, we have the value of the object, we have a shadow, and then after our shadow, we have a highlight. Okay, so if I come in here, there's my sphere, right? The one thing I have, which is actually part of the light still, that's why we call it 3 dimensions. There's 3 planes. There's highlight, core shadow, okay, and then the local value of the object. And then when that light comes through, what happens? I have a little bit of reflective light, just even much lighter than that. Little bit of reflective light that comes back and hits the back part of the sphere, but that's just bounce light. That's totally different, okay? So look, that's how I have, okay, a realistic object. So if you keep that in mind, if I'm looking at this, what's missing out of this? You have the shadow, you have local value, there's no highlights on there. It's not finished whatsoever, okay? So I have to come in there, and if you're telling me light is coming from that particular direction, okay, to keep going into my brushes like this, it's annoying. Someone changed the preferences on there. You're going to have light that's coming in. It's going to be hitting part of this facade right here. Do you see that? That facade's going to light up. You're going to have light. Look, you have an oval surface here, right? That oval surface, the top of it's going to be lighter because the plane's getting hit. Okay? So it might be a little bit more brighter on one edge, and then the light might fade around a little bit. Okay, but that's basic drawing 101 with light coming in. Even here, we're going to have some light indication coming down, you know, hitting some of these stones. And as those lights hit, it's going to fade off around to the edge here a little bit. Okay, then we're part of that light source is coming in and hitting some of this. You're going to have effects of light coming down, hitting the ground. So it's going to be a little bit lighter here around that shadow. See, that starts to pop. Starts to make it realistic. Right now, you don't have any of that. You're missing all that. You have no indication of light inside here besides the little marks that are here. So you need to go into this piece and really determine if light's coming from that angle, where are your highlights going to be? Where are your shadows going to be? How is the ground going to be affected by it? Because look, you have all these other elements that are going to take place. You have to have this realistic sphere. This sphere accounts for that object. It accounts for this. It accounts for objects back here. The only difference is the rule of atmospheric perspective. As things recede away from us, they get lighter. So here in the back, you're not going to have a super dark shadow like this. Your sphere is going to change, and your sphere is just going to become more lighter like that as it recedes in the back. Does that make sense? Okay, but right now, you're missing part of that rendering phase in here. There's no render in there. And then even with the path, if that's a path, right, is that supposed to be a walkway or okay, if it's a dirt path, have gradients in it, you know. So watch, let me go over this really quick, and I'm going to show you something here. Let me take my brush, and I'm going to just see if I can't really quick come in here and paint over part of your path that you have. Okay? Give me 1 second. I need to try to blend this a little bit because you have a little bit of some colors here, just a little bit of blend in there. Let's get this blocked in here. Okay, let's grab that color, get that in. Okay, so when we do paths, paths have light, value, and adjustment and degradation to them. Okay, 1 second. There. Actually, that didn't come out too good. Let me undo that part. Let me blend this in just a little bit better. There we go. A little bit of a blend. So, the problem with that path that you had in there is this. There's like no change in the path. There's no thick to thin that's a perspective thing. With convergence, if I have nothing that indicates convergence, it's not going to look correct. Okay? So, if I want to get in here and do a correct looking path, 1 sec, almost done. Let me get this out. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my lasso. Go up on top of this here. And I have a path that comes out from here, let's say. Let's say part of my path zigzags to about here. Okay, thick to thin. Then maybe my path comes over part of this hill. Okay, and then maybe my path comes down, wraps around this way, and it starts to get a little bit thicker now. And then as it comes towards me, maybe it gets broken up and it comes this way and it gets a lot thicker. And then maybe it starts to round and come up through part of here and get up into there. Now is that path, now I need to look at the thickness here, right? If I'm going from thick to thin, paths get lost and found all the time with broken shapes. Now as this path comes over this hill, you need to look at what's the thickness going to be. It's going to be pretty thick as it comes up over that hill, right? Because that's the principle of scale. Okay, so in scale, something is this big, it's an inch. As it recedes away from me, it drops down to 1/2 inch, it goes to 1/4 inch, and keeps getting smaller and smaller. So my path needs to do the same thing. I need to give that feeling that it's getting very thick, and then it gets very small. So just if I take this right now, if I take a brush, I hid my path right there. I'm going to go to a white, and I'm just going to, I do this all the time really quick with just a soft fuzzy brush. I'm going to come in here like at 3%. Super light, and this is what's really cool, is watch what happens. By hitting this very light, do you see the path sort of develop on its own? The path is coming into play now, coming into part of the piece. Okay, now I can have degradation on the path where I might have some of this punched up a little bit. I might punch that up a little bit. I might come along part of this edge here. I might have a little bit more light hitting a part there, and then I could bring part of that path. Now I even noticed down here that even gets a little too thick for me, so I can come in here and I can erase some of that off, and I can thin the path down a little bit more as it's wrapping around part of that element there. Okay, so remember, thick to thin. Once I get that path, okay, if I have the path selected right now, hold on, I'm going to deselect, select all V, move, there it is, it's selected. Now I can come in here and I could take like little textures. I could take something like this that looks like rocky ground, or if you looked at my brushes I gave you guys, I gave you some cool ground elements. So if I take this guy right here, paths aren't always pure white, but they do have little rocks, and they have highlights to them, they have dark areas, they have grit, they have grind on them. So I could come in here and take this color now and come in on part of my path, and I can shrink it down a little bit, see what happens if I'm here at about an 8. And I can start to put a little bit of texture on part of that path. Okay? I don't get as much coming out of that brush, but I'm going to switch to another brush here, like this guy. Bam. Let's see what happens. So I might need to go a little bit richer. So now I'm making some little adjustments in the path to make it look a little bit dirty. Okay, but still I get that feel of a path that's winding down here. It's going from here, it's winding around, and it's going from thick to thin. Okay, inside my piece. right now that just cuts, excuse me, the one that you had before, which was right there, that cuts right across the middle, doesn't really do anything. It needs to come this way, zigzag around. This cutting through here looks like a waterway, but it doesn't look correct. And part of that is the issue with the scale. So remember, so transition to scale, this is something we learn in perspective, all right, 101 here. All right, so if I come in here and if I have a horizon line that's, sorry, I lost my brush option. If I have a horizon line that's up here in your piece, there we go. If I have a horizon line that's up here, okay, and I can, if I take scale and measure it horizontally, right, if I measure this distance, let's say from there to there, and I come in from a vanishing point and I look, that path's going to go from there, and then as I come back to this other vanishing point right here, that path is now that wide there. So then if I come back here, transition part of that path here, that path is now that wide there. See that? It's called transition to scale. If I come back to another point, measure off, I'm going to have that, and I'm going to have this happening. So I have all this distance from here to here. If I flip that horizontally, the principle of scale is just saying that if somebody is this tall right in here and they're receding back, they're going to get smaller, smaller, and smaller as they recede back, right? You're not doing that in your piece right now, and you need to do that. That's going to be huge in getting the relationships in there, okay? Especially with the light as well. All right, let's go over here. Let's take a look at this guy right here. Same sort of principle on this. It's a light thing. I know you're telling me the light is coming from this angle, right? Okay, and I get it there, but if light's coming down right there, how come I have a little bit of light here? What about here? It's almost the same value. So what I can do is, hold on, take off the lock there, okay? And I'm going to come in here. Just take off that little dot there. So let me go back and take off that red line there. There we go. And then I'll add another layer here. All right, so if you have light that's coming in an angle here, I can barely see it right now. It's barely identified on there. You got to get that light to pop, okay? Looking at the values right here, this value right there is almost the same value as what's right here. See that? So this side is the light side, and that value right there is literally identical to that. Same thing up here. This value right here in that corner is the same value as that value, almost right there. So you need to get in here and really determine those facades again. We're going back to perspective and rendering and sort of basic drawing principles of what's happening on that light and what we're seeing. Even here, if light's coming down that way, how come this rock facade isn't being hit? There could be a face of a rock here. There could be something in here that's getting hit, okay? So even if I came in here with a lasso really quick, and if I select part of this rock front, maybe there's a facade here, maybe I have a little bit of a facade in there, and in here, like that. If I hide that, I come back in with my brush. Okay, if I take a real soft sort of gray and give that illusion, the light's coming in here. Do you see that? Just by hitting that up a little bit like so and putting a little bit of indication of light coming across, it starts to look like light is hitting the tops of the rocks. We have facades there. So the same thing's going to happen in here. If light's coming down here, you need to really just, get in there, put another layer on it, and just see what happens if you come in and punch up part of these, part of your highlights in here and get this shape to really feel like it's wrapping around itself, okay? That's not really quite happening right now. Look, you have this edge here, then you're going to have a little highlight on here, and it's going to sort of wrap around there. I'm not using the right brush for it because I'm getting that fuzzy feel. So if I come over and switch brushes, and I go into like this guy here, which I like a lot, and if I come down here, that's still way too thick. So if I start to put a couple highlights in here, I start to indicate what that light's doing. Light is going to wrap around part of this edge right here. It's going to come here. It's going to wrap around part of this. You really don't even have many highlights. You just need to get it. There might be some highlights in here, and then that light's going to sort of fade off along this top edge. It's going to wrap in there. If light is hitting right here, coming in. This gosh, this whole area right here can be pretty bright with light just sort of lightly casting off, wrapping around part of that edge. And if that's that intense there, what about here? You're going to have some of that, the light hitting over here. You have this other little castle tier here. So you need to really get in there and start rendering part of this guy out, okay? Giving that feeling that light's coming from a direction. You're missing all that light source. Same thing's happening if I come over here, right? Okay, I get that that's the moonlight, right? But if the light's that intense, these are pretty flat right here, okay? You could get some, look at how bright that moon is. Go pull up a photo, go look at moonlighting, and go look up some photo reference and look at what the moonlight does and the intensity of that light. It's bouncing the sunlight and what it does to part of the scene. You need to really pick up some of the highlights on here. One of the problems that I'm having on this is that it feels more like a shape and there's no line wrapped around. So I'm not getting a feel for the structure. This feels very graphic. There would be stone wrapping around. These cornices feel a little off and stylized, right? They feel like you just took the lasso tool and went like this really quick, okay? But whereas, if I have highlights that are coming in on this guy, first of all, if the moon's out bright, there's no spread on the moon at all, okay? With a moon that bright, you're going to be having a little bit of haze coming off part of the moon, okay? Oops. Didn't mean to grab that. Uh-oh, what happened there? It changed. Where are we? There we are. Sorry, hit the wrong. Okay, so we're going to have, look, there's going to be moonlight coming off of that. There's going to be a spread of light coming from there, coming down on. And then when that moonlight does that, you're going to come in here. That's really close to the moonlight right there, right? You're going to have some really dedicated highlights in here, up here on this top. All right, if you want to get stylized work, we could look at someone like Denise Blakely Fuller. We can look at, what's his name? Ivan Earl. We can look at very stylized artists that are creating graphic shapes and elements, but they're still abiding by the principles of light that are happening in here. And you're just not quite getting some of that in here. This is going to be hit. That surface is going to be a little bit lighter. This surface is going to be hit. You're going to have, that's going to be pop out a little bit more. Same thing with what's back in here. I don't mean to make them all the same thickness, and some of it's going to depend on what surface is closer as well. But like down here, you just need to really punch up those highlights. Same thing that's happening down here on the ground, right? It's just one value straight across there again, okay? And it wouldn't be this dark right here, like right next to it. It would be dark maybe in the foreground and get lighter. So this is flattening out part of your whole element, that whole giant sort of V shape in there. And it's so dark right now. If I pull up, remember atmospheric perspective, we talked about this, that we're going darker to lighter, receding back, okay? Even part of your sky in here, it's so rich, it's so dark. Skies are very light in the back. They're very sort of hazy. You need to really dull that down quite a bit, okay? So if I just came in here, and if I just start working on just thinking about where light might be hitting, and not just coming in here like throwing highlights in too all across the place, but what about where the texture is? These are made out of bricks, right? More like what? Marble. Okay, if it's made out of marbles in sections, there could be light spreads going across. Okay, there could be little texture feels. So maybe if the light's hitting here, the light's sort of spreading across part of here. Then we get back down here on this corner, we have a little bit of bounce light coming back into that edge sort of that gets that area to pop right in there. Okay, same thing happening in here. If this is overlapping this, okay, this might be in shadow right here, but then where's that part of the highlight? If you have part of the highlight hitting right in here, light's wrapping around part of this and fading off. You just got to get in here and really push these highlights and the light in there to start getting some more indication of shape. And then even on the back, the clouds are just, you're so dark, and these don't feel like clouds. Those feel like paper cutouts put on there. Clouds are very soft. They sort of blend in. They're usually, this feels separate, like that's cut out on top of, right? clouds have this feeling of being very soft and sort of misty type of feel, okay? And you should use that in advantage to part of your light here. So look, if I come over here and I paint on top of some of this real quick. There, let's say I'm blending part of that in, like so, okay? If you want to get a cloud in there, look at where your light source is. What's going to happen if my light source is on top of my clouds? Where are my highlights going to be? On top of the clouds, right? You don't have any highlights right now on your clouds. They're all one base value. So even if I get in here when I do clouds, I always think of clouds in terms of shadows with highlights on them, okay? Because they're structures. They are pieces of cut spheres, usually sliced in half, that are existing in a three-dimensional plane. Okay, so here, let me come over here really quick. Let me grab like a cloud brush really fast here. See what I do with this guy. I don't remember this brush. So watch, I'm going to real quick here. Let's go to, I'm going to go to a little bit like a softer gray. What I'm going to do is start with a little bit of a dark value. And let me see if I can get a, hold on, I'm not liking that cloud right now. Let me get another one. That one's pretty cool. I forget I have some other ones here. That guy looks like it could be fun. So here, I'm going to come over here with this. And what I'm doing is, see, I'm pressing down on it right now. I'm getting that dark value. Do you see that? It's the value underneath. Now I'm going to come back on top, and I'm going to come in light, and I'm going to put some little highlights on top of where the highlight's sitting on top of the cloud. You see that? So I have the dark base underneath, and now I'm stamping a little bit, and then that light source is pretty bright. So now I could get in there and really punch up some highlights. Like if I look at this, I have sort of this billowy cloud, right? So this top section right here is going to have some little highlights on it. That's going to have some little highlights coming across part of this top area here. Like that, right? So now if I look at that, I have the feeling of a cloud. You see that? It has the feeling of mist. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Don't crop. So I have the feeling of mist. Okay. Heck, what's great about Photoshop is you just do one, select all, copy, paste. You can move it over to another side. Oops. Look, I can take this guy. I can transform him. If I had your layers, look, I can even put him up here on the top a little bit more. I can rotate him a little bit. I can erase part of his overspray where he's overlapping the castle and make it look like he's falling sort of behind the castle versus the other ones in the front. Since that cloud's in the back, if I want to, if it's a little closer, I can pump up a little bit more of the light source on it. Okay, I can also, since it's on another layer, I can fade it off a little bit more behind. So I can paste, put another cloud down, transfer that. Flip it horizontally. Okay, I can stretch them out a little bit more. Okay, I can get them angled in here. And by the way, just a reminder, you guys, a stamp tool, super awesome. Okay, by taking this tool right now, if I target this part of the cloud with a little target, come over here and I stamp a couple of areas, I'm copying parts of the cloud, and then I can make that cloud look totally different from what I had before, just by using that tool. It's a little bit more in the foreground. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit, blend it in like so. Erase off part of this. Now I have another cloud there. Clouds have moisture in them. You just put a shape in there with no light on it. So you got to readjust those, okay? So if I come back here and I start taking off these highlights on those clouds, it gets very sort of flat and graphic very quick with no indication of light, okay? You have to work on that light. It's important. That's something you should have, should be in your repertoire from basic drawing and other painting and perspective and rendering classes. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, and talked a little bit about this guy's sort of the same thing, like we already talked about. Just it's missing that feel of light coming across. Okay, Jameson. Let's dive into yours. Okay, and so before I say anything, what are your thoughts
for this piece?
Yeah. As you look at this right now up on my monitor. One of my concerns is that all the beauty in this is right here in the middle of the illustration. You see it?
Yeah.
It's all, oops.
I only finished 2 of the 3, so I just...
You're fired.
I underestimated how much detail
Well-
I could put in and then continue it through the pieces.
Well, it's not even, that's just the thing, is you don't have to get in there and put a ton of detail. The
Oh, I know,
detail
but I
should be
did,
where the
and
focal
then-
point is. Your
Yeah.
focal point here, the most interesting silhouette shape in your design is this. That's the silhouette, and it's just, that's the golden rule. Most interesting silhouette shape is where the eye goes.
Yeah.
And that's right there. But you have, and don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, especially if you zoom in there. You have all this great rendering and like little like wind blowing sparks of dust and all this stuff in here, right? And all these little dust flakes. I mean, all this is gorgeous in here. But the problem is in your composition is, you know what it is we need to go back in here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I know you need to finish that one, but I just got to throw that out to you. Okay, so that's the problem with that one. This guy, it's looking really nice. That's going to be a great piece. Just get in here and keep rendering what you have like
Okay.
back in there, right? That's all you got to do, and then show that to me again. And those are the only two, right?
Yeah, for that one I really wasn't sure how to render out like a castle and make it look like it has realistic brick and all of that other stuff.
Well, some of it's
I
just
just
getting
need
in
to-
there. It's lost and found detail.
Yeah.
You know, you might have like a couple edges that are going this way with a couple stones. Maybe down here you see where part of the rock is blending in. So you have a little detail, open space, and then open space. And then another thing too is lights on in this castle. Here, let me just... We also need to keep the focal point right here into part of that, right? So I like this guy here, but look, as far as detail goes, right, let's just see if we can do this real quick. I have to change every time. Let's take that brush here. So if I just grab like this little bit darker value here, I'm going to come in here and just sort of nudge in. Oops, that's too thick. If you start to nudge in, maybe there's some rocks that are coming up in here. Get them to blend in a little bit. Just get a little bit of that texture type of feel, right? Maybe here you have a couple more rocks going across, sort of over. Sometimes I just paint them in like this. Almost doing like, remember stipple?
Yeah.
Just doing a stipple on a layer. And then I could just come to the layer really quick and just drop down the opacity a little bit like that. See? Now I get the feel that like there's like a little bit of texture on there. Okay, the other thing you could do is, told you guys, mentioned this before, it's a thing I call minimizing when I'm working, is I take something like this, that's a dedicated texture, and I'm on a separate layer, and I'm going to come in with a darker value, and I'm just going to go like this. Like that. So I just stamped it a couple times. And now that it's on a separate layer, what I can do is I can just come over here, I can turn this, I can scale it, not only scale it and get it to fit, but even with other transformation tools, I can warp it, right? Wrap, I can use puppet, remember puppet warp?
Yeah.
So if I want to bend it, and then what I do is I come over here in this, just knock this down, get it in there like about so, and then come back with your eraser, knock your eraser down to about 10% or 5, and then come in and then blend some of this detail in like this. I'm just erasing some of it, trying to get these lost and found edges. So now all of a sudden I have what look like could be vine growth going along the side. And I build my textures up. I might start there, but then just looking at that, do you feel the vines in there?
Yeah.
Well, I have a little vine brush, so now I could come back in here and start. Actually, I could just probably do it by taking my normal brush that's here and using that vine mentality, right? What's that going to do for us? It's going to also allow us now to get in and wrap around the shape. So if I get my brush really small, and I'm just going to apply pressure at different points and just sort of come in here and try to make it look like there's a bunch of vines. So I need to go a little bit. Sometimes when you swab it, doesn't quite, you got to just go up another 5 or 10%. So now I'm going to just, look at this. I'm going to come down to here, make it look like there's just little bits of vine. Try to get that value in there. Go up a little bit more. Still want to go a little bit richer. Okay. Maybe a little bit of these plants are sort of coming off the side like that, right? Maybe some of them wrap around the shape here. So I want to use that to my advantage to wrap part of these shapes and found. So now I can look like there's vines or something going up there, and then as I come up here, I might identify part of a window, But then if I switch back and I come in with a white now and sort of put, you know, a little bit of a light, that's too gray. Let's go a little bit whiter. Hold on a minute, what's going on? Oh,
Your
that's
opacity.
why. Duh, I put it on opacity. So now if I come in here, now it's too bright. Let's go back to that lower gray. So now if I put a little bit of a light on like this in here, and then I come back in and hit it with this guy, just really sort of soft. See, now I have a little highlight against the vines, so now I get a dark and a light against each other, right? So can you see if I take that, and now if I get, maybe there's one like over here a little bit on the side, I put one back over here maybe, and now all the other ones I'm putting in here, maybe this one's a little bit different, maybe it's a little bit thicker, but shorter and fatter type of thing, maybe that's on this side. Okay, and now let me come back over there. Let's go back to the vine thing. So what layer did I have the vine thing on? I think it was 3. Nope, 2. Aha. So this is where I love Photoshop, right? This is on a separate layer now. Select all, copy, paste. So I can bring that over. And heck, I can just put some of that. Let's just throw it about here. And what I'm going to do is go to distort now. Distort. I'm going to grab some of that distortion, bring those vines over and across like so. I'm going to erase that godforsaken highlight right there. And I'm going to come in, dull this down a little bit. Okay, get a little bit lighter, come back into erase, like at about a 20. Erase some of this off the edge, fade some of this in. Okay, I could do the same thing with the rocks too still, right? I can get some more rock definition back in there. But you see what's happening now? Where's my focal point?
It's the castle.
Exactly. So that's, you know, all it is just me. This is beautiful in here, the stuff you did. Actually, even this in here is supporting what you're going to do up in there. But see what, and this was actually sort of cool. This was a happy accident and me wanting to have some variation in there. By having these vertical and now having this one go like this.
Oh, that would contrast the shape.
Yeah, see now this one, this light's like going across sort of. And you're like, you immediately go to that light. Why? Because all the other ones are going sort of vertical, right? And then all of a sudden, here's this other light where you're just like, doo-doo, you know. And that's even a little too vertical. I still wouldn't get in there, fade it off a little bit more, like so. But now we know exactly where the focal point is. And it's just the little details. You can't see what kind of vine it is. It doesn't matter. It's just getting in there and doing that. And then not only that, look. Another pass, right? Come in here, and so match the perspective of what's going on. So look, I'm going to just come in here and start pretending I'm selecting parts of brick. Okay. Maybe this is more like stone, let's say, and then this is again that thick, heavy brick that you have in a castle with like the mortar in between. Let's say here, 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 there. Let's say I put a little bit. This is where channels come into effect. Really awesome. If you guys know anything about channels, you can create and bring in your own textures. So I could go, and I could show you that if you ever want, if you don't know how to do it. In channels, you can bring in a whole giant texture and bring it in as a channel, load it, and you use it as a silkscreen method. And that's basically part of what I'm doing in here. Now, I have a tendency to do this when I zoom in close into something. I forget what part of the perspective is. So what I do is to make sure where the horizon line is, if I'm looking up, after I put those across, Jameson, I come back in with a negative lasso and I take off on a curve like that to round it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To match part of that perspective that's in there. Even that's okay. So look, now that I have that, if I minimize out, I go to hide, I take my brush, I come back in with my dark value. I'm going to go down to like 4%. And really softly, I'm just going to come across here and watch some of these little textures just sort of build up. Remember where your ants are, right? Fading in into some of these little parts in here. And remember gradients, dark to light, little pits. Dark on the edge and then let it fade off, right? Dark on the edge, voila, and then it sort of fades off, right? And the cool thing is since I did this on another layer right now, copy, paste, bring that in over here, transform it, flip it to the other direction. Okay, rotate it up a little bit, paste it again. This time I'll bring it here, transform it, squash it, stretch it vertically like this. Maybe that'll go like down here a little bit, okay? So if I keep doing that for a couple times and we look at the difference, see what the little bricks, little formats. So we have vines, we have bricks, we have round bricks, we have straight bricks, little edges. You can get little cornices on here, and all of a sudden now that's your focal point. And then what you could even do is once that becomes your focal point, you can come back in here and cheat a little bit, and you might come in here and decide that you're going to have just a little bit to punch this guy up as secondary. Just put a little bit more light around him, like that. See, now he pops a little bit of a highlight down. If you wanted to, you could put a staff in his arm, glowing, and then it would match that. And then where those little highlights are there, you now can come in and put little highlights like on a couple of these little brick edges. See, now that pops. This area might pop right in here a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of a line that goes back this way. Okay, so now primary read up here, secondary read. Then the last thing I would do on this piece to put the icing on the cake, if you have that foggy, misty feel in there, bring a cloud in the front towards us, bring one back behind the piece. So let's do that real quick. If I come over to my cloud brushes, and where's a good one? This was a bush brush, but it sort of looks like a cloud someone gave me. Actually, no, that's more of a forest brush. So let's try this one under clouds. Actually, some of these are pretty cool. Let's try that guy. So look, if I come in here really light, I'm on a separate layer right now. I always do my clouds on separate layers. Why? Because I can adjust them and sort of modify them a little bit. So if I punch this guy up a little bit and looking at where the light is, let's say I decide to underlight him a little bit. Maybe see if I... Okay, so now I have that separate cloud. Maybe if I pull him up here, it's a little too thick, blocking a little bit too much of the castle. So I might streamline him a little bit and put him a little bit sort of in the front like that. And then if I select, paste that guy, and bring him down back here, and just to be safe, let's flip him horizontal so no one can tell the difference. And if I put him sort of in the back behind the castle, and then erase, I don't have your layers, so I just got to do it the old-fashioned way. And then erase where he is in there. And then maybe lighten it up just a teeny bit. Because what that's going to do is it's going to now get part of the dark castle to pop forward, right? So I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to just duplicate the layer. And it's going to be really white now. There, do you see how that? And now, not so it's so white, I'm going to move the other layer underneath a little like that. And then come back to combine them, come back to erase, make sure that this part that's overlapped is still being overlapped. So now I have a little bit of a cloud in front of it, creates a little bit more atmospheric perspective, and I have a cloud that dips behind it. You get those little details in there with a couple of the lights, and boom, dude, you're almost at a finished piece now. So you're at that 90% mark, and look at the difference. Before, after, right? I mean, that cloud in the backing and those lights on, and you don't need to have more than just a couple lights on, you know? It's funny because I look at my monitor and it looks so much different than here. The monitors up that you guys are looking at are like 10% brighter. So some of the values, let me show it to you like that. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, that looks way better.
Yeah. On my, so what, I'll render the recording, then you can go back and watch the recording because the monitors are always, with the HDMI cables, they always get a little bit lighter. Anyway, so good stuff, Jameson, though. Okay, you're on your way.
Thank you.
Okay, doing good work. Okay. You want me to save it?
Sure.
Okay. Put it on desktop if you want that, and we'll say save. Remind me and I'll get that for you later. Okay, so we talked about Kevin's. We're done with that one. Let's move over to punishment for Jessica. Just kidding. No punishment, Jessica. I'm just teasing. All right, let's take a look. That's great. Do you like it?
He's blind.
Wait, a little louder, inside voice. Wait, not library voice. What? Okay. That's a really nice piece. I think what a couple things that I really like about it, just to go over it really fast, is that number one, I think the composition's quite nice. So all of you and the rest of the class, if you're looking at that, let's talk about what makes that piece successful. So there's a couple of things. First thing that makes that piece successful, let me get my brush, is that most interesting silhouette shape is right here. See that? Boom, our eyes go right to it. Second thing, outside of the silhouette shape that makes this, is the general composition, which is good foreground, midground with a pointing element, another mid to background with another pointing element. Okay, so that's another element. What I call these directional lines, and these little elements that point us towards our subject matter. The next thing that makes that composition very successful is this general feel. Sorry, I went back too far. Of this semicircles. See them? See how many there are in there? They're quite a bit. And that repetition of going back, especially this, ready for this? Here's the biggie. This is how students usually screw this up, is they repeat the shape going back, but they make all the distances equal. Okay, so this feels accordingly in scale. Larger, smaller, smaller, smaller. She even has another one in there, smaller. See that? Aren't you in perspective? Yeah. So that's that transfer of scale happening, of something going wider and receding backwards. By getting that in, it's going to help push and establish part of what's happening in that interior. Okay. The other thing in there is the scale. That's the next item that really establishes part of this piece. By looking at the height of the individuals here, we know that these individuals there are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood like this, and up here they're going to be really tiny. So it makes it to be a huge castle. Okay. All right. Now, outside of that, a couple notes that I would give you on that to adjust. All right. One is watch the value. See this right here? You're at almost a pure black. What does black do? It flattens. That's right. So I know you want us to look here on that focal point. I get it. But be very careful with that black in here, and you start to get really dark in a couple of spaces. With that dark behind it, it flattens it off a little bit. So what you could do is, now you got to make a decision here. This black and this black here, oops, got to switch back to red. So you can see that black there, the sky starts to get really dark. Now, when you get clouds in wintertime, you get that where you get those sort of really dark, ominous clouds coming through. I would watch part of that. I might lighten that up just a teeny bit, but then I would really come in here and maybe just lighten that up just a teeny. Okay. The other thing that I would think about doing is this being a winter piece with snow. I love clouds and love mist and fog. It's a great way to create and overlap distances between foreground, midground, and background. And if you come in here and if you start doing a little bit of that, also on top of that, you have this really nice sort of rock right in here that's in the foreground. What if you came in here and you have another sort of rock, maybe like this or whatever, overlapping here? By doing that, it allows you to now come in and throw a little bit of a cloud on top of it. Okay, then when you get back here, since you have a dark or a gray, so it's light against dark, right? So you have a dark with a light on top of it. Then you get back here and you get these really small sort of misty clouds around this, and then that's going to pop because it's going to be on top of that the gray in the back there, right? You can't put a cloud here because it's going to be on white and we're not going to see it, right? Right. Okay. Really nice composition. Oops. Put it on the same layer. Really nicely done. And that's me being picky on the front here. Another thing that you could also do if you wanted to is if you take part of this, I love trails and pathways. So what you have here is really quite exceptional with all this detail. If this breaks apart, and maybe part of when we get back in here, maybe this sort of breaks up a little bit and we see this washway sort of deteriorating back in here, and maybe it zigzags back a little bit more into this. If we punch up just a little bit more of this path, maybe coming through here in that transition of this icy sort of waterway or whatever going back, it helps bring us back as a directional tool back into part of the castle area. And you're already doing that a little bit in here. Part of me just wants to punch it up just a teeny bit more. But that's me being really nitpicky. It works just the way it is, but just watch the values. Okay? All right. This guy. It's evening time, correct? So I would get in there and punch up that light a little bit more. Okay? The light, I see it. It feels like, and actually be careful of this, because right now, I don't know if you noticed this. It doesn't, your moon doesn't quite feel, your light source looks like this. Like a V. You see that there? Your light, if this is a moonlight, needs to be curving like so, right? Or sun or moon, depending what you're thinking about. But it would be curving. I'm not getting that curving feel in there right now. I'm getting this. Like you have a special type of. Now, were you going for a night shot with like a moon, or are you going for an evening shot? Almost morning? Because see, this is why I didn't get almost morning. Okay? In morning time, the light is screeching out, and you get a lot softer values. The reason I was getting more evening or moonlight is because of this up here. The darkness of that value. So here's the difference between morning and afternoon. Okay? In morning time, that sun is coming across and it's reaching. So you're going from really bright, and then it's spreading across, and things dull down to a really light, like 1 and 2 value scale, right? From a really bright. On the evening time, it's sort of the opposite. And when we get into nighttime, we're talking about a dark atmosphere of light. And then the sun, the moon is reflecting light from the sun, and the moonlight is now coming up into a dark world. You see the difference? This, with your clouds being this dark in here, okay, it feels, and it's a little darker on my monitor than up here on the screen, is that it feels more like a nighttime shot to me than it does, or evening shot than it does morning shot. So if you go morning, this has to lighten up, and that has to lighten up quite significantly. Okay, does that make sense? So, but I don't think, just if anyone asks you, it's not a morning shot, right? It's really simple. Just say it's meant to be an evening shot to have this particular approach, and you just get that in there and you're done. Okay. Also, I know you like working rough and fast. I know you love that stuff right there, where you get in there and you get to be all brush crazy and just have rough brush edges all over the place. I get that. I love that stuff too. However, here you need to identify and finish some of the detail on your structures here. You could blend some of these values. You know what I mean? You need to sharpen those edges just a little bit, because it's getting a little too rough. And especially like when I was first looking at this, when I was right up over in this area, like right in here, this is getting a little weebly wobbly looking, and I would just come in there, spend another 40 minutes and define some of the architecture and really get it to be crisp and nice. Okay? Nice and edged. All right? There's a place for this. The other thing about this, by the way, this is very tight in the back here. You feel that? All this is rough and loose, and the castle's like, it's like super tight, hard edge line. If you need to blur that castle a little bit and get some lost and found edges on it, let some of it deteriorate off a little. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so that's the thing here. The difference in these shots is that this is a medium close-up shot right here. And when you have a medium close-up where something is right in from foreground to midground, you can't let it get all lost and found edges. You can a little bit with some areas that you don't need to know, like areas down in here or over here, but you need to get this nice and crisp with the light coming up there. You can push some of that intensity of light and really push that piece. Other thing, stars. You can have maybe a couple stars in there if it's that nighttime shot, right? You can see that in the sky and so on. Okay? All right, and then let's go over to your other one. Good work, Jessica. Overall, it looks very nice. Okay? Same thing with this guy. Looks good. It's very rough. I'd get in there and sort of punch down a little bit more on that castle and be very careful with some of your perspective that you're doing in here. Okay, if you're like you have this, and I'm not quite sure what that is. Okay, I don't know if that's supposed to be the outside tier of the castle where people walk and it's wrapping around. So if your vanishing point and you're coming in with these lines, and you have, but now you have sort of lines sort of going this way, changing a little bit. So just make sure you keep part of that structure making sense in terms of where, if you're telling me that, hey, my horizon line's here, but then what I would do is maybe this is in a 2-point structure like this. If that's the case, I would adjust some of these and relief them a little bit more to match that 2-point perspective. I would be very careful on some of these look like they're converging down to a vanishing point right here. And even this feels like it. You see that? Even that one feels like it right there. So to be honest, I know that's what you're going for because they all match up. But then you got up to the castle and you're like, well, it's going to be too forced. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the vanishing point, right? That's a tough one, right? Someone's going to look at that and be like, you could have pulled it off better. Now you're getting into a more advanced level of designing, right? And the perspective needs to communicate properly through the piece, so I would adjust part of that. Okay? Good work, Jessica. It's fantastic. Fix those last couple ones, okay? Next, Rachel. And someone gave me one here with no name on it.
Oh, that's fine.
Who's mine? Oh, Anto. Okay, let's take a look at these. We got perfect time to sort of get through these. Okay, Anto, you're first. So,
I realize that the perspective's way off on the one before, right? Someone can see me right now.
okay. This one, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. In terms of looking up, you sort of have this, it's like it's a little bit of 3-point and 4-point. You sort of have a point, a vanishing point in the middle where it looks like things are converging to, and then you sort of have a point way back here on the side, and then you have a point there, and then you have the third point going up. So you're sort of, when we're talking about that in perspective, and you have a grid like this in a world on 5-point, we have 1 point here, 1 point here, 1 point here. Your view is sort of coming in like this, right on the middle of that sphere, right? Okay, so yeah, just adjust that. Be careful with it. It's not too bad, but I think as far as that structure goes, you just had to do it in 3-point. It did not have to be done in 4-point, or you know what I mean. Just have that upshot look, and I think you're doing that well with the castle receding up here. Just finish part of that off. Okay. All right, but the values are feeling good. The dark to light, and I like the light coming in. Feels like it's working pretty well. It feels like you're not quite there yet. You're almost there, like at 80% level. Just identify a little bit more of especially what's happening with the light and here, 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 and then part of those surfaces, right? And get that to really pop because that's your focal point. Okay. All right, and this one obviously needs
I'm finished.
more time, right?
Yeah.
All right, need a little bit more time on that guy. And then let's come back over to here.
Yeah, same thing. I feel like I need more time.
Overall, it's good. It's nice composition. It's structured, Watch some of this. If you look at the distances, from here is almost the same to here,
Right.
right? Try to have those in variation. And then, is that an organic thing that's coming down there?
Yeah, everything's organic, so I worked on that one a little bit.
So I'd be careful with that, because right now, when you guys look at that, do you get the feeling of organic? I get the feeling of rocks. This feels more jagged face and edges. I almost said fedges, which is faces and edges put together. Okay, but it's jagged faces and edges than it is organics to me. If you get here, I have a little bit of curve coming in there. You got to be careful. I would really accentuate and give a feel of part of these curves, and then also be wrapping part of the shape with where these curves are going and how they're wrapping around, and get more curves in there. I'm not getting part of that on this. I mean, that right to there and there, that's a point. That's a jagged edge. So just, maybe you don't need the organics. It's up to you. You decide what in there exactly that you need. But some of this gets a little lost in there. I would identify those facial facades of what is happening. Where's the front plate, the side plate, the back plate, of all those facades, so they make sense. The other thing, too, is the castle. The castle feels like it was a rough thumbnail and you painted it real quick. little bit more tighter on there and figure out exactly what those tiers look like. And remember, you got to be careful here. If you're trying to give me an upshot like this with your horizon line there, it's going to be really hard. Why? We just talked about this in applied perspective, right? Because the distance from here to here is the height of your castle, and you have that much convergence versus if your horizon line, not that was like a football play. That's Photoshop looking out. Versus if your horizon line's down low and the castle's going up like this, we have all this distance from here to here to display convergence, right? All right, you know that because we've been talking about that. But for a rough light pass, I get it, I see it, it's working. But just get in there and define a little bit more, okay? All right, cool. Thank you, Anto. Good stuff. You're at that 80% level. Just wrap it up, finish it, okay? Simeon. Ooh. So, let's see where to start on this, Simeon. Very cool. The lights, it's getting really fun, nice graphic sort of feel to this. Okay, so let's start with this guy here. Oh, I love this because it reminds me of sort of, a little bit of Mary Blair meets that stylization with, a couple other artists that are out there. And so here's my thing on this is if you want to get this to work, I would Frankenstein light it a little bit more underneath to get this to be the key focal point. Right now you get a lot of contrast over in here. See that from far away? So the easiest fix for part of that is basically to come in here. If I zoom in up there, let me take that brush. If I come back over here, I already had it. I got to restart the machine because I can't right click and get my brush up. It has somebody else's preferences in there. And let's go to, so what we need to pretend is not that. We need to pretend that we need to intensify part of this light. And not, actually I'm second guessing it. Not coming up this facade, but behind it maybe. Where we have this feel of light sort of coming up into here. And it's coming up into here. And even back behind here. The light's sort of coming up in here. This way we get up into here and then we really pack and hit those. You hit these little edges in here. We come in here and then we really identify like bam, light's hitting up on part of that edge right in there. It's coming up under all these other little details that you have. Fun structure though. It's like a weird looking beehive of houses or something, right? It's like German architecture meets some funky and then fade some of it off as it gets up. You're doing a good job, dude. You're almost there. It's cool that I'm seeing you. Not only have I been watching you improve in terms of your drawing, but even your light sensibilities are getting better. Okay, which is great. All right, almost done. Then what I would do is just come in, let's change to this guy here. And then just put a little bit more spread light, slightly sort of. So do you see the difference now? So let's look at, that's where we were, and that's without it. See, I mean, without it, we're going to those left corners. Now, boom, it's just sort of underlit. And then what you can do is then by using this to your advantage, maybe you darken like this just to create more contrast, darken the right side a little bit more. Maybe that's in a shadow side to where part of the light is, you know. Then we can maybe punch the light on the back side there of that mountain a little bit more. Ooh. It's where Donald Trump lives. No, I'm just kidding. It's where he keeps his 10-year-old girls. No. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry, but I have a 10-year-old daughter, and after I heard him make that comment about that 10-year-old in the elevator, I just totally lost all respect for the guy. He saw a girl, and he was with somebody else who was recording it, and he made a comment and said, like, I'll be dating her in 7 years. Like, I'll be getting some of that, you know, like, that's just wrong, you know. And here's my little girl at home is like, you know, she's 9, and, you know, she's all about, you know, always wanting to change, and, I'm going to go play with my friends, I got to put on another outfit for this, and another outfit for school, another outfit for this, and she's just a sweet little girl. And then there's a guy out there who I hear make a comment like that. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to be dating her. And she's, it's just, you know, sends shivers up my spine, right? Anyway, that's what I would do, because look at the difference of what's happening, focal point. And then not only that, Simeon, you could have a couple birds being underlit. The birds get underlit, and then the clouds. So clouds are huge. The clouds you have, and by the way, that looks like a pillowcase up above.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like
Stylized them. They don't have to be a traditional cloud, but do something cool or design it where you might have these hard, since it's such a hard angled piece, you could have hard angled clouds that are really cool and sort of stylized with points on them. But remember, they're being underlit, so we'll have underlit and we'll have the top of the shadow, and then the birds would be huge, dude. I don't think I have my bird thing here. I don't, because what you could do is just, I don't have my bird brush, but if you had dark birds and then take those same dark birds, duplicate the layer, go to levels, change them to white, and just move them over down just a teeny bit, and then lighten it a little bit on the layer opacity, and they'll look like they're all underlit birds flying around. Okay, but it's a really nice piece. It's quite fantastic. Okay, I love what's happening in there. This guy, just punch up the light. So if light's coming in from one side, just get in here and punch up where some of these lights are coming from, okay? You know, so we really get a feel of light side, dark side. I can't do it with a fuzzy brush. It's not going to look right. And then also shadows. Look, if light's coming in this way, this ground is all the same value right here. That's flattening out the piece. So it looks like you got to a certain point on that, and you sort of, yeah. And this is why, for the other assignments we're going to do, I'm going to lessen them up in this class, because some of you guys need a little bit more rendering time. It's a nice piece. It's a good composition. I like the shapes. I like how we go to the castle, but that shadow back here, light side, dark side, getting some detail on there, get it to pop is going to be very nice, okay? And then this guy's very cool. It looks like an editorial piece, doesn't it, for like an illustration magazine? That's where the Citibank officials live. Up in this, you know what I mean? Like, and this is from, hold on a minute. I know if Trevor was in here, he'd be like, he'd be bagging on me right now, right? So it's like, this is where the upper echelon, and this is all their money they're sitting on, right? So I think that's a really fun piece. I love the stylization in it. I think the lighting's feeling pretty good, but two things I would do. One is a texture pass on that. If you're going to go for a graphic stylization on that, do some really cool like patterning effects. And I could show you a way you can do that with channels really quick by taking like a real photo or a real image and then put some textures on there. The other thing I think on that piece that would really help it quite a bit is if you just give us a general feel of light coming down. You know, because right now I'm looking at that cloud and it's the same value all the way across, right? Not the cloud. I meant to say, well, cloud is, but also the background sky is what I meant to say back here. So if you get in there and if you have a little bit of a white, and if I have a little bit of a feel that there's maybe just a little bit of light perhaps coming down at this angle, just lightening it up a little bit. Oops. Like that. There we go. See what that does a little bit? Yeah. It's just a little cheat of, you know, that holy and light sort of coming in. Heck, you can even erase a little bit. I mean, it really gets you to focus right in there. Same thing then with the clouds. If you have that, hold on, let me change brushes again. If we have that light, therefore, coming in that direction, you can then get in here and get, heck, you could probably even just do it easier with the lasso tool. It's part of your style, all right? See, if we just get some of these highlights punched up on the clouds a little bit, they just act as other little highlights that keep our eyes locked right in there. Just the lights coming through. Okay, that's it. That's fun though.
When you're like doing the line, get rid of the line. I find that you can't have like holes where the line used to be. Is there any like you just paint over that, or
Yeah, just paint over it, pretend the line's gone, and remember using texturing is a huge advantage for you. So by texturing bricks, for example, I'll draw this in red so you can see a little bit easier. Textures indicate, when you lose line completely on a drawing, textures indicate volume and shape. So look at your perspective here. You have a wall that goes that way, and then you have a wall that recedes that way, right? So to add more to that, imagine a brick pattern right there, and then the brick pattern changes in the opposite direction. That's going to do a lot to accentuate the shape and tell the viewer you're actually putting in, like read between the line, you're putting in invisible lines then with texture that are there to help identify the shape of what's underneath. And you can do it with texture and lighting. I mean, if that light's coming across here, that's right in there, there's no reason why you can't come in here. Hold on a second, let me do this. And if I come in with that straight edge, oops, I missed the whole top part. And then hold on a minute, I didn't mean to take all that. There. So now if I hide that and I come in with my brush, got to go back to fuzzy brush again. It's just putting on these little 10% details, Remember I talked about what Spooner used to always tell me about when I was working with him is we had 2% here, 3% there, 4% there. We've made our drawing 8 or 9 or 10% better than what our competition is, right? So here, if I come in with this white, maybe I just get, no, that's way too much. But look, I can just get some little highlights on the top of those corners, sort of, coming down. Even maybe a little bit on that edge. Well, I didn't quite match up your edge, but here, deselect, erase. I can just sort of fade this stuff in. And it just does a little bit more for your edges up there. Do you see it? It's just a teeny bit more of a detail, but you have that and some of that other cloud information together, just all sitting on top, and you can easily, it adds a lot to part of your piece, There we go. Oops. So it's just a couple little light adjustments, that's it. And heck, even where this light goes, now I look at it, I want to go back to my eraser, like 5%, and just dull some of this down a little bit. Knock it down. So we know where our focal point is now. And if you wanted to, you could, what happens if you light up that door? Where it's like, oh, and there's a light coming through part of that bridge too. Now they're just basic, but I love how you wrapping those clouds around there was a great choice. It made it a lot of fun. Okay. All right, good stuff. Okay, great. And next, Rachel. All right, Rachel. I think you did a good job on this, Rachel. It came out very nice. Again, what I love stylization. Even myself as an artist, I've spent so much of my time always having to do painterly stuff, and it's nice. There's a certain feel about when things are stylized and they have correct light. Kevin, this is something I want you to look at in here, right? When you look at these pieces, every one of these pieces, you get the feel of where the light is. Okay? So you can tell that the light's coming in from this side right here. Do you need me to sign that form for you? I can do it real quick. No, it's all right. So, 1 second, guys. I'm just signing this little forward. You need me to sign right there? Initial. There you go, sir. Have a good weekend. Okay, so when we look at this, look, boom. We know the light's coming in at that direction, right? We can sense it because there's rays there. By the way, one little thing to adjust in perspective. Do you remember about rays, light rays? When the light source is inside our picture plane, it becomes a radial light source, right? Right now, so here, is that supposed to be is that in our picture plane? Or no? Is that like a cloud?
That's a cloud.
Okay, if that's cloud, for a minute there, how many people looked at this and thought this was part of the sun? I did too. Okay, so what I would do, if that's a cloud, I love, because then you look at it and you're like, oh, there's the stylized cloud. It's right there, right? Okay, it is a cloud. However, though, what I would do you see how that roundness can be the sun?
Yeah.
So, two things. The sun is out of our picture plane. Because it's out of the picture plane, it's so far away, our light source is now going to be, oops, let me grab my ruler here. I drew it wrong. I'm drawing at an angle. Is going to be like this. It's going to be at a parallel angle, remember? You were in perspective, right? We talked about that, right? So our light source now is going to change. Okay? Move the mic away for a minute here. So our light source, you're doing this. You're doing that to that, which is telling me that it's the sun or the moon is right inside our picture plane and we're getting that radial source. So since it's further away, I would just come in here. That's a simple fix because you have that on a separate layer. I would just make that lines more like this. Then what I would do is I would fix that cloud somehow. I would either minimize the cloud and bring it in so it's more like this, where we can maybe see the back side to it so we know it's not supposed to be. I just mess with it on a layer and get that feeling to where it fits best. But right now you got to be careful of that. Okay, other than that, I like what's happening in here. Then if you're getting these little hot points in here, spread that light over here a little bit more. Right?
I wasn't sure because I thought that the castle would be casting a shadow over sort of that stuff.
Well,
I wasn't sure.
it all depends on this, Rachel. It all depends. Is light coming through? From that point of view, coming towards us, where it's going to spread and hit, or is light in this particular shot coming down? Oops. Like this. See the difference? Because if light's coming away from us and towards us, it could cast and hit here, 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 and lightly spread even a little there if you wanted to. Okay, so that's the difference. If light's not doing that, and light's coming into the direct side view, it's going to come in here and still hit, highlight, 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 but then you're going to get a little fade off into here. The difference is if light's coming across at this angle here, I can extrude, I'm using Maya terms here, I can bring part of that light spreading across the top there. Okay? That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Kevin, what I was talking about, the reason why I wanted you to look at this is that was one of the things in your pieces that was sort of missing was that indication of light. So when I look here, how do I know light is coming, where's light coming from? It's coming from the left, and I know that for two reasons. One, I know that because of the light side, dark side on these objects here, but I also know that because the clouds have highlight, and little shadow, okay, and then dark, and then I know it because of here, light side, dark side, dark side, even on top of here, that's light side, and then medium, and then dark, okay? So she's showing all those planal changes happening, and then when I get here, light side, and then dark side, okay? So you need to get some of that in I think that might help you out quite a bit seeing that. I hate to do this paint by numbers thing, but seriously, there's something to that. When I was a kid, I remember seeing paint by numbers, and I tried it once. And the thing that sucks about starting with paint by numbers is that you sometimes, it just was like put this orange in spot 1, but it didn't tell you how much black or white in terms of what were the value changes of that local color. Okay, that's the difference. When we think about paint by numbers and we draw it on top of here, it totally works by explaining that, like, if that's a 2, that's a 2, that's a 1 highlight, right? That makes sense. And then as we get across to here, this highlight needs to become to a 3 and then to a 4, maybe into a 5, because light's spreading and going around part of the object versus, the dark sides. Back here in this corner, yeah, that can be down to, like, if 10 is black, this can be down to like about an 8 or a 7. And then that can be about a 7, this can be about 6, that has to go back to about a 5, right? And then it sort of tapers back up, thinking about how that number system works in there. Okay, I think you did a great job with that. The only thing I might recommend is try giving me, have you ever seen when people paint a face?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're illustrating a face, the nose is a golden point because the nose always has like one little bright highlight right on the end of the nose or right here on the bridge between the eyes. Okay, you need that little bridge or nose highlight, what we call that little hot spot in there. So it's literally as simple as you coming in. Let me change brushes real quick. And if I take, sort of like this guy here, if I can come in with this, let's go to white, a little bit of a gray there. And maybe I just decide like right about here, I'm just going to sort of go like, bam, put a little highlight right in here. Maybe this guy just gets a little hot right in there, like so. And then maybe right about here. See, just 1 or 2 little highlights in there that just sort of pop. Oh, not that. I hit shift there. A little bit like right in there. Okay? That's even too much. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, I put too many highlights in there, right? So that's when we put too many. Just a couple, just even like that. 1 or 2 little hot spots, and boom, our focal points right there. Could even be something right in here. I wouldn't have more than like 2 or 3 little, and then it pops it, okay? And I think this piece down below that you did here is quite wonderful. It's very nice. I love, look at this one, guys. What's working in here? Look at the composition. Look at the flow. The only thing I might recommend on this, which is just a really minor thing, is this cloud is pushing us in that direction off the page. And what I might recommend is come back how you did this part here. Just take this cloud and then put the tail whip whipping us back that way. Does that make sense? Because what's happening is you're putting these little whips into this direction, which are pointing us and telling us where to go. And if we just flop it over the other side, so you got to be careful because this line in here could easily tell us, just leave the page, don't come back, right? But we don't want it to do that. So by getting in and just doing that little thing like that, just that little curve points us back into your subject matter. And look, it's almost like an Evel Knievel jump. You go here and you almost tie right into there. So that little point points us right back into that wrap way, brings us back full scale every time. Okay? That's it. I think that's a nice piece, and I think you did a good job on it. Came out really nice. Nice set of values, good composition, like the silhouette, like the graphic read in there. The other thing to be picky, right here, watch where this guy is overlapping in tangency relationship to the other silhouette. See that? This guy's sort of standing on this character's head right there. Right? So just, all you have to do is just bring this character down a little bit more like this and then leave them back there. But I like how you got really small with the scale up there in the parts of the castle. Okay? Looks good. All right, nice work. All right, guys, I believe, let me see, that's it, right? Is that everybody? Yep, that's everybody. Okay, excellent job. Keep it up, and we know, so obviously, Art Center is going to be here in a couple minutes, and they're supposed to be here this time. I haven't seen her yet, but she said about 12:30 to 12:45. So what I'm going to do is basically readjust your work per our whole crit, and I'm obviously going to have to lecture on Tuesday about shapes. I did do a demo over the summer. The problem is I left the demos on the machine downstairs that got stolen. And so I think I lost the demo on shapes. So at our next class on Tuesday, I'm going to change our assignments up a little bit. I'm not going to do as many, and we're just going to focus on using custom shapes and how to knock out an environment or a world really quick, okay? All right, so that'll be, we have to talk about custom shapes because they're huge. And some of you as students don't know how to create custom shapes from photos, how to use them, how to store a library, how to save them. They're sort of like brushes, but there's a lot more things that we can do with them since they're vector based, and we can use them as vectors or pixels. They're really fantastic, okay? All right, thanks guys.